appreciating the organizers of this event. Barack Kazim, he's been on my neck, for the past few weeks while I was somewhere in the world, and finally I came back to Kuala Lumpur and we're able to have this. I think I would like to thank him for his efforts, and the moderator, thank you, and thank you very much for that introduction. That was too long for me. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So I'm gonna actually use my PowerPoint presentation. So I'll request to actually share my screen with you if you don't mind. Now, before I do that, let me begin with this disclaimer. I'll be mentioning a number of firms and companies throughout my presentation. Now, mentioning their names doesn't mean I endorse those companies. Most of them are international firms, law firms, and I'll just be using them for illustration throughout the presentation. I need access to share my screen, if you don't mind. Okay, I got it. Perfect. I guess most of the people in the audience are lawyers. I would like to assume most of them are lawyers. So I will actually be discussing many legal issues today, and I'll be happy to hear from you. And I'll be staying put for like 2 hours or so. So I'll be happy to take so many questions on Islamic finance, legal issues, structuring of sukuk, and everything we do. I'll be using the audio as well as the chat box after my presentation to respond to questions as much as possible. Let me begin with the title the organizers gave to me. I'm told to speak on Islamic finance law as an emerging area of law. Issues, challenges, and opportunities for practice and business. This is something that is not so common. When you talk about Islamic finance law generally, it's not so common. What we hear all the time is Islamic finance or Sharia. And I always try to correct an impression, whenever I speak anywhere in the world. Somewhere they gave me a topic. I was in Yale University many years ago, and I was told to speak on Sharia law. And I had to actually start with a disclaimer. There is nothing like Sharia law. And I think it's good I mentioned that clearly today. Many Western professors actually use this term kind of in a very loose manner, Sharia law. There's nothing like Sharia law. You either call it Sharia or just simply say Islamic law. And what I refer to as kind of a tautology, using the same word for another word, it's something not acceptable. Because under the Sharia generally, if you look at the Arabic term, Ash-Shari'atul Islamiyya, that is the Arabic word. So when Western scholars are trying to interpret this to English, they say Islamic Sharia. This is Sharia law. Now, on the other side, you have our brothers from the Middle Eastern countries who learn the Arabic word Ash-Shari'atul Islamiyya. So they prefer to say Islamic Sharia because that is the literal translation of Ash-Shari'atul Islamiyya. So on one end, you have this word Islamic Sharia being used in the literature. Again, it's wrong. Then on the other side, you see because the Western scholars consider it as law, because they focus more on the hudud part. So anything Sharia is law. They don't look at the ibadat part. So ultimately what you have is two different wrongs on both ends. So we've tried to correct this impression globally, and I think many of them took it positively. I've never seen any pushback to this, even in the UK, as well as the US. So it's something I believe we should actually try to start with, because I want to gradually move into defining what is Islamic finance law. So we have to understand the whole perspective, the whole concept of Sharia from the whole spectrum. You talk about the ibadat and the muamalat on one side, even though some scholars have actually defined this into, different, they categorize it into different categories. They say rather than having this broad two categories, Sharia can have what they call ibadat on one end, then you have munakahat, ahkamu sultaniyat. Munakahat are rules relating to marriage, and you have ahkamu sultaniyat, rules relating to administration of state. Then you have others, even the jinayat, they bring the criminal law aspect. But again, I would like to just focus on the broad classification, which is ibadat on one end and muamalat on the other end. Now, we're going to go through some of these items today. I mean, I'm going to start with introduction, which we're already doing, and we'll move to how do we demystify the term Islamic finance law, because we all understand what is Islamic finance. But again, how do we actually understand what constitutes Islamic finance law? Because the topic given to me says this is an emerging area, and what is the role of the lawyers? So we need to really understand what we want to discuss today. And again, one thing that comes to my mind is when we're writing one of the textbooks on Islamic finance published by Pearson in the UK. That was in 2011, 2012. And I remember we had a discussion, myself and some of the co-authors in the US. The title of the book was Islamic Banking and Finance. Introduction to Islamic Banking and Finance. Now, I actually told the publishers, I said, no, I don't want to use banking because Islamic finance is a wider term. So rather than using Islamic banking, it's simpler to just say Islamic finance because you talk about the takaful part, you talk about the capital market part. I mean, then the banking. The banking is just one component. So we had this debate then, but again, the publishers wanted us to use some of these popular terms. So we ended up using Introduction to Islamic Banking and Finance. So for the book. So there's this continuing kind of discussion, I mean, we do have regarding the appropriate term to use. But again, for today's discussion, I'm gonna focus only on Islamic finance law. So we're gonna define this. I've discussed this in one of my old papers, but again, I'll just explain some of the ideas I actually explained in that paper published about 10 years ago or more. Now, the next aspect will be the law firms and businesses. We just have to focus on this. Now, we know what we have today. Most of the things, you know, you have the traditional law firms serving different clients, corporate clients and individual clients. So we want to see what is in for these law firms. How do they actually move from whatever they are doing today, they transform into a kind of a new business kind of model, particularly when you look at the new normal. I mean, I was doing a research, you know, being a Nigerian lawyer, I mean, doing a research during the lockdown at the peak of the pandemic. And one thing I actually noticed was some lawyers actually, because they couldn't go to court, there was no income. Similar research was conducted in the UK. There was no income. Many young lawyers were suffering. Now, what do we do if we find ourselves in this kind of situation tomorrow? The pandemic is not over. Let's assume it's over. But in the next few years, you have another pandemic. What do we do? Or you even have an epidemic within a country. We've been having this, you know, Lassa fever for, you know, for many years now in Nigeria, in most countries, in most states in Nigeria. Now that's a pandemic because it's happening within epidemic within a country. Now let's assume you have to even lock down a particular state because of this for a long time. Now, what do you do as a lawyer? Do you just sit there because you cannot go to the court on a daily basis? So these are things I believe we need to actually discuss. We'll look at the challenges and try to explore some of the opportunities that are available to us. And before the concluding part, I'm gonna actually discuss a case study briefly. Actually, this case study, it's gonna be an integrated kind of business where you have lawyers, accountants, finance experts, auditors, Sharia experts coming together to establish a firm, and this is a global firm serving the industry. And it has offices all over the world, including Kuala Lumpur. Actually, the whole thing started in the UK. So we have to actually understand and see what kind of business model we can adopt to better serve the industry, locally and globally. So that will be the fourth part of our discussion today. And finally, I'm just going to give some concluding thoughts, you know, for us to just share, and we can then open the floor for Q&A. I'll be very, very happy to take your questions at the end of today's talk. Now, let's look at the first part on demystifying. Now, this slide actually summarizes the whole thing I want to say. But before I go into the slide itself, I want you to concentrate, so I'm going to take a step back. Because I think it's quite important for us to look at Islamic finance itself. What do we have to offer to the world? Now, for the past few years, whenever I speak, I always tell people Sharia compliance is very important. And I'm happy we're going to have people from the Sharia non-compliance department of a particular bank, you know, today. You know, so this is something very important. When you talk about Sharia compliance, it's the hallmark of Islamic finance. But is that all? That's the question I have to ask. Whether that should be our focus only. No. The answer is simply no. But we have to start from that. Sharia compliance is the hallmark of whatever we're doing. I don't want to go into the debate of Sharia-based and Sharia, compliance. They say Islamic finance is mimicking the conventional finance. I'm saying this because I know questions will come later. I get this question all the time whenever I speak. They say, oh, everything we do in Islamic finance is just a replication of conventional finance. I will wait for your question on this, and I'm going to answer it based on the Sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ. I'll just take you back to the time the Prophet came and how Islamic law itself developed up till today. So this will be very important, when we get there, because again, mimicking the conventional finance, yes, we're seeing that, but what is the implication? Are we doing something wrong? That should be the first question. If the answer is no, then we have to retrace our steps. If the answer is, if it's yes, we have to retrace our steps. But if it's no, we have to understand what we're doing and see how we can improve on it. If you look, let me give you an example before I demystify Islamic finance law for you. During the time of the Prophet ﷺ, that classical era had, if you look at even the way riba was prohibited, the way khamru was prohibited, alcohol. In usul al-fiqh, we talk about at-tanjim, gradualism, the way Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala actually prohibited things. It's a classical example of how prohibition comes. Sheikh As-Sabuni in his book, Ayat al-Ahkam, I think it's a 2-volume book. It's quite important, discussing all the legal verses of the Quran, identifying them and trying to look at the origin of some of those kind of verses, the way they came. It's important for us to understand that what we call legal acculturation occurred during the time of the Prophet when he came. If you look at the transaction like Mudaraba was not new. Ijara was not new. They were all there. According to sources, Mudaraba was there for like over 3,000 years before the Prophet came. But the Prophet actually brought a unique message to transform the whole economic kind of laws they had at that time. And that's how you have all these verses coming. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will tell you, Ya ayyuhalladhina amanu la taqulu amwalakum bainakum bil batil illa takuna tijaratan lan taradin minkum. That all you who believe, don't eat up the property amongst yourself except when there is a kind of a mutual kind of agreement. There has to be a meeting of minds, consensus ad idem of the parties. This is the message. You see, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala was revealing those verses and the Prophet was implementing them. And in a way, you had reforms to the existing economic kind of society you had at that time. So this is what we call a kind of acculturation. They had to bring in the Quranic culture at that time. So this is how most of the things that were, they had at that time were being transformed. Ijara was transformed to the Islamic Ijara. It became a kind of a fair and just one. You can't just go and actually take over the property and the house, the family. You take them as slave because they didn't pay your rent. This is what you had then. So the Prophet transformed the whole society, and this is what we are actually reaping today. And this is the main origin of Islamic finance at a very early stage. Now, when we come to replication or no replication, we find ourselves in a conventional world where the finance industry itself is dominated by the Western kind of models. And the conventional banking has been there for over 200 years. Now, Islamic finance re-emerged just last century, towards the second half of the last century with Tabon Haji. You had so many experiments. Even in Nigeria, you had this West African Muslim bank. So all these things came up, and gradually you had the establishment of the IDB in 1975-76, Dubai Islamic Bank coming up. You had the Faisal Bank in Sudan. So all this cropped up over the years. And again, you've been having some improvements here and there. I'll give you an example of Malaysia, from the legal perspective, before I go into demystifying the term Islamic finance law. Now, in Malaysia, in 1983, they introduced what they call the Islamic Banking Act, 1983. That was to introduce Islamic finance into the country. They had the Islamic Banking Act in 1983. In 1984, they had what they call the Takaful Act for Islamic insurance, two different legislations. Now, what you have ultimately, it was more of an experiment over the years. There were pitfalls along the line. In 1988, you have the Tinter, the first case going to the court, and there was no aspect of Sharia advisory where Sharia scholars will have to actually give an opinion. So it developed over the years, and ultimately in 2013, you have what they call the Islamic Financial Services Act, which consolidates all the laws, takaful and the banking and other laws as one. And it's a comprehensive law where you have very strict rules being introduced. What I'm trying to say is, even in Nigeria today, they started with regulation of the Central Bank of Nigeria. For me, it's a gradual thing. And I think over the next few years, we'll keep improving. But the stakeholders must actually be on their toes as much as possible to ensure that reforms are made in the next coming years. But again, I think whatever has been done now is highly commendable, but there's room for improvement, and I think this will happen in the next coming years. Rome was not built in a day. I won't say Kaaba was not built in a day, because that is spiritual. I better say Rome was not built in a day. Now let's go into what we call Islamic finance law. Basically, if you look at the needs to formalize the regulation of Islamic finance generally, it's something very, very important. What you had before is lawyers are only used as consultants, to draft agreements. That's it. And I'm sure even up till now in some countries, and even in Nigeria, they are still used for this only. Just draft this agreement for us and change everything. Where you have interest, replace it with profit. And you just control, find and replace. We see some of the lawyers doing this in other countries. I hope it's not happening in Nigeria. Islamic finance is far beyond this. It's far beyond just find and replace. Because again, in law, we are used to using forms and precedents, which makes our job easy as lawyers, because you don't have to redraft anything from the scratch. But a situation where the nature of the agreement is actually totally different from whatever you are using, whatever precedent you want to use, then we've got to be careful. We shouldn't just use control, find, and replace. So it's very important for us to develop this area you call Islamic finance law. Now, some scholars have referred to it as law of Islamic finance. And sometimes I tell people I'm an expert of law of Islamic finance rather than Islamic finance law. Now, either of the two, it's fine. You can decide to use Islamic finance law or law of Islamic finance. Now, the first thing you have to note is that when you talk about Islamic finance law, we have to talk about the law and regulation. That's the first thing. For you to be an expert in this field, you've got to be familiar with laws and regulation. And here we talk about the enabling law. And in the case of Nigeria, we talk about the Central Bank Act and I think the BOFIA, which are still actually in place. And you have all the relevant subsidiary legislation. These are the regulations being issued by the central bank. It's very, very important. So you've got to be familiar with all these laws. And the good thing about lawyers is once they are trained lawyers, they are called to the bar and they have experience and practice, it's going to be very easy for you to transform from your current practice into an expert in Islamic finance law, because the principles are virtually the same. You just get to know the legislations, applicable laws. Now, the next part is the governance framework. The governance framework actually is a function of the law and regulation. But here, we've got to be careful that the Sharia governance part is very, very important. We are used to the corporate governance framework and the shareholders model, the stakeholders model, the hybrid models, the different models you have when it comes to corporate governance. These are the Western concepts. They are also adopted in Islamic finance. And you have the Companies Act, or in the case of Nigeria, CAMA, regulating anything related to the corporate model. But when it comes to the Sharia governance part, in the case of Nigeria, I know you are all familiar with the phrase and the ACE, the ACE and the phrase. So this is very important, this structure. At the central bank level, you have a supreme body where you have reputable Sharia scholars actually reviewing things and approving transactions for the whole country at the macro level. Now, at the micro level, at the bank level, you also have the ACA. And this is the committee of experts at the bank level that also help to vet and approve some of the products. So this kind of two-tier Sharia governance process is very important. Mind you, this is totally different from the corporate governance framework for the bank. However, these two frameworks do meet. The corporate governance and the Sharia governance framework, they meet at some point because, again, you have to look at, even when there's a conflict on Sharia issue between the Sharia, I won't say Sharia committee, the ACE and the phrase, and the board of the bank itself, which one prevails? All these are regulated by the guidelines issued by the Central Bank of Nigeria. So it's good to familiarize yourself with these guidelines. So all these fall under what we call the Islamic finance law. Now, this very important part, it's a bit tricky because the first two are very easy for any lawyer to pick up. This third part, the Sharia issues and contracts, it's something you may have to spend some time studying it, or you have to go for courses to understand what they are. You have to understand the different structures of Sharia, the different products you have. And I'm happy many Nigerian scholars, working in some of the top banks, the Islamic banks in Nigeria, are actually qualified. They have the necessary qualification from AOFI relating to Sharia. This is something very important anybody can do online. You don't have to go to Bahrain to do it. Sharia issues in contract is very important. If you don't know this part, you cannot claim to be an expert of Islamic finance law because this is the crux of the issue itself. How do you structure products? This is the crux of financial engineering. How do you develop new products? You have to be familiar with the Mudaraba structures. For instance, you want to structure a corporate sukuk. So we've had sovereign sukuk recently, which was highly oversubscribed. Now, if you want to structure such a kind of a product, how do you do it? You have to be familiar. Okay, you want to use Ijara. It's based on Ijara. Now, for Ijara, which means a lease kind of model, do you need to have underlying assets? If it's yes or no, okay, yes. Where do we get the assets? Now, do we get assets to fulfill the full amount we are issuing, or we can get assets to fulfill a part of it to make it tradable at the Nigerian Stock Exchange at the secondary market? So all these things, lawyers have to be familiar with them. Don't say no, Sharia aspects belong to Sharia scholars alone. If you say that, some of the Sharia scholars themselves are actually qualified solicitors and advocates of the Supreme Court now of Nigeria. Some of them actually can competently advise on legal issues, not only Sharia. And we have in phrase like Professor Abdulrazak Alaro. You have them. Those scholars have actually gotten to that level to actually go for legal, studies to study law, and they are well equipped. So for lawyers who don't have background in Sharia, they need to go and learn about it. Sharia structuring is not just, I know Mudaraba is this, Musharaka is this. It's a detailed kind of learning you have to go for. It's not something you can learn even within a month. Because when we come to legal documentation, I'm not going to discuss that today, but I think it's important I say this. For a simple sukuk, I'm going to issue a sukuk of $1 billion next week. This one is a global one, actually we do, to manage liquidity across borders. And that particular sukuk, we are having up to 15 different documents, 15 different contracts for that sukuk alone. Apart from getting even the Sharia approval from the Sharia committee, it's a process that took us over a month to structure this. And a lot of iterations with the Sharia committee itself. Oh, no, Sharia committee says, no, this asset is not acceptable. We cannot add it. No, we can add another asset. Financial assets can even be used. If you buy a sukuk, let's say the FGN sukuk, many of you, perhaps you subscribe to it and you bought some. That sukuk is your asset because it's your share of the asset, the FGN asset itself. It's your own share of it. Do you know that asset itself, you can sell it as it is? The sukuk you have, you can sell it at premium with profit. We can use that asset with you to structure a new sukuk. This has been approved by Sharia scholars. So what I'm trying to say basically is one has to really familiarize himself or herself with the different structures and how you come up with this financial engineering from end to end. And I think this is the most important part. The first two are very simple for any lawyer, but this third part requires some studies. And I do hope we'll have more lawyers in Nigeria studying this part. And I'm going to give a recommendation before the end of today's talk regarding what to do. Because again, we need to start engaging with MBA. I think that's one of my recommendations today. We need to start engaging with the Nigerian Bar Association to establish a kind of Islamic finance practice. I'll come back to that, but it's very important for us to be able to do that. I think it's important for us to really study what Islamic finance law entails. Now, the final part is what they call the legal enforceability and dispute management part. Again, one thing we always look at whenever we are doing structuring of Sukuk or any Islamic finance product, the first thing, particularly for someone like me, I actually deal with the whole world. Whole world means my Sukuk actually that I issue here in Kuala Lumpur can actually be traded in any country. So I have to be interested in the enforceability of the contract in any of the countries across the world. I have to exclude certain countries like the United States because I'm issuing Reg S, what we call the Reg S. We're not issuing 144A. This is based on the Securities Commission kind of law in the US, the securities law. So I have to be careful in terms of which jurisdiction, whether if there's a dispute tomorrow, if I want to sue, whether I can enforce this contract in that country. This is something we have to be concerned about. Same thing applies to Nigeria. Now, you are actually structuring a product for a bank, let's say Murabaha, for car financing. How are you sure whether that particular contract is enforceable under the Nigerian laws? Lawyers have to ensure it's enforceable. They have to ensure it's drafted in an appropriate way. The governing law has to be very clear. Now, when I talk about legal documentation, they are what you call the boilerplate clauses in Islamic finance contracts. The boilerplate clauses are the standard clauses. We call them adhesive contract. Again, I'll come back to this because I know we have people from the bank here, and people talk about banks just give customers contracts. Customers do not have opportunity to review those agreements. They just sign, and most of the time they just say sign here, sign here, sign here. They even mark it for you. They mark where you're gonna fail, and you just sign, and you may be signing away your life. Now, the issue here is, for me, when I go to a bank, what I do, I just tell them, hey guys, I need to read. They just, no, just sign, sign, sign. Then I just laugh. I say, look, I'm a lawyer. As I'm talking, I'm reviewing the terms because it's very important. Most of us don't read. Why do you think even sometimes people have access to your email, they send you all sorts of email from nowhere? Because you have agreed, you gave that consent to them while buying something else online, that they can sell your email and phone number. And they were able to sell it. And why? Because you were just downloading the app and you just accept terms and conditions. Because you did the app, you don't have time to read 20 pages of an agreement, terms and conditions. But it's something we have to be careful about. So when it comes to enforceability, sometimes contracts are not enforceable. And what we do, and I believe many lawyers in Nigeria do this as well, particularly those advising on Islamic finance, they do seek for legal opinions. So the first step is you draft the agreement for the bank they use. Fine, they look at it, but how enforceable is that contract itself? Will it be enforceable in the court tomorrow if a dispute arises? So these are questions we have to answer at the time we are drafting the agreement. And to further give some comfort to the customers, what we do sometimes is we actually seek for a legal opinion to be attached to the contract, because we deal with the global jurisdiction when it comes to Sukuk. So let's try to get this. It's very important how enforceable it is, and dispute management. When a dispute arises, how will you resolve the dispute? Now, the easy thing today in Nigeria, I think I wrote something on this about 6-7 years ago, an article published in a European journal regarding dispute management in Islamic finance industry in Nigeria. How do you resolve disputes? At the moment, what you have basically is they go to the court. And I'm glad I had a discussion with some of the senior officers from some of the Islamic banks we have in Nigeria. We discussed some of the cases they had during one of my visits to Nigeria. And I found out that everything goes to the court. Though we have some arbitration centers in Lagos, in different states, but at the moment, they don't have the expertise of Islamic finance. So this is an opportunity again for you Muslim lawyers, for lawyers specializing in Islamic finance, to try to develop this area of practice as much as possible. ADR, alternative dispute resolution and litigation. I'll tell you what we do basically. I was the head of the legal department before I became the CEO of this organization. So when we do the drafting, what we do is we use what they call the hybrid dispute resolution clause. I wanted to share one with you today, but again, I think my computer messed up a while ago. We talk about a hybrid dispute resolution kind of clause where you have negotiation. Parties will have to try to resolve on their own. If you're not able to do that, then you talk about arbitration. Most of our contracts are governed by the English law. So we talk about the Arbitration Act 1996 of the UK. And ultimately, we still give the right to the investor to sue. So litigation will still come for enforceability, because again, every bank, particularly, I mean, when you ask the representatives of the banks that are here today, they will tell you, I mean, when you give any financing, you need to get your money back. You don't have choice, because the money comes from investors, it comes from depositors. So you cannot afford to lose your money. You're going to fold out. So you cannot say, okay, let's keep negotiating, mediation, whatever. Yes, you can use mediation. You can use anything, but enforceability is very important. It has to be enforceable. It has to be enforceable, and it has to be swift. It's not something that we drag for long, because I mean, the banks are not Father Christmas, including Islamic banks. They are not there to give money out and not getting the money back. We have to be realistic. Yes, we talk about this theory of ADR, let's go for negotiation, mediation. Even mediation, it has to be enforceable. Again, there's a way we do this, but I'm not going to go into all this today. We're not talking about, we're not having a seminar on enforceability of ADR. There are ways you enforce even some of these ADR processes. For arbitration, we know it's purely enforceable. Once you get an arbitral award, even if it's cross-border, it's enforceable. You have what they call the ancestral, model law on international commercial arbitration, which has been adopted by most countries. And you also have the ancestral arbitral rules, which has been adopted again. Most arbitral institutions use this, and up to 160 countries actually accept this cross-border enforceability of awards. Awards are like the judgments for non-lawyers. Awards are judgments of arbitral panels. So they are enforceable if they are made under the ancestral arbitral rules. So this again will help people, I mean, particularly who are in different jurisdictions. And this is based on what you call the New York Convention of 1958, which allows for cross-border enforcement and recognition, or the other way around. It's recognition and enforcement of foreign arbitral awards. So this is something you have, and again, you have to be familiar with it. Because again, what I'm trying to say is, look, the essence of today's lecture is not for you to keep doing what you're doing as a lawyer, as a Muslim lawyer who specializes in Islamic finance. No. The essence of today's lecture is to explore opportunities within and without the country itself, particularly within this pandemic period. And there's something I wanted to say, but I think I shouldn't say it. The pandemic should be an opportunity for you. I'll say it, but I'm going to keep some info about this. During the peak of the pandemic, we negotiated a deal at ILLM. And this deal is the best deal we've ever negotiated. I won't tell you the amount we made, but again, we capitalized on the pandemic. That was in April, to actually negotiate a big deal. So the pandemic, you have lockdown, people staying at home, not going anywhere. For me, it should be a blessing in disguise. So we have to just think outside the box to think of what can we do. I'll give you some hints later, inshallah. Now, when we talk about Islamic finance law, I haven't given you the general kind of perspective of things you need to know about Islamic finance law. There's this thing I said in one of my old papers, published in 2012, where I said there is a need for formal specialization in the regulation of Islamic finance. I quoted an author who's in the UK, he's in SOAS actually. He's one of the proponents, Foster is one of the proponents of Islamic finance law. Foster, Eckerbank, then there's Kilan Baz, and myself. I can actually count them globally, the global scholars who have been writing about this. They feel we should develop a discipline, not just a discipline, like an academic discipline. Yes, that's important. People should specialize in this in the university as professors. We should also have specialization in this among legal practitioners. So though the experts in this proposed field might not necessarily be Sharia scholars, they will be well equipped with the in-depth knowledge and expertise of Islamic finance generally, with special reference to regulation of Islamic finance in different jurisdictions across the world. This group of experts should be able to complement the functions of Sharia boards, and if need be, they may be appointed as members of such boards to provide the much needed guidance to the board on the specifics of regulation of Islamic finance products institution in that particular jurisdiction. And I'll tell you something, my experience with this. Before that, number one, if you look at the AOFI, AOFI is the Accounting and Auditing Organization for Islamic Financial Institutions based in Bahrain. It's an international standard setting body. Now, AOFI actually has the Sharia board. Now, in the Sharia board, they have issued what they call the Sharia standards on different things, on Waqf, on debit card and everything. I mean, all the standards, I think they are available online. Now, one thing I want to say about this is, one of the things they emphasize is the need to have a diverse Sharia board, diverse Sharia committee, to have experts in it. There's no harm having a financial expert in the Sharia committee. Now, they have emphasized more to have a legal practitioner as part of the Sharia committee, because it makes nonsense of the whole decision or the fatwa issued by the Sharia committee if it's not applicable or enforceable within the legal system itself. In the case of Nigeria, we are lucky we have at least somebody, a Sharia scholar who is also a lawyer, sitting at the central bank level in phrase. But what about at the bank level? I think you need lawyers as well. So this is where it's important to have people that will immediately advise some of these scholars that, yes, this is a good product, this is good, your view is good, but it has to be enforceable. Now, you have this continued tension between the municipal law. Municipal law here means the Nigerian law and the Sharia. It's not only in Nigeria, it happens all over the world. Even here in Malaysia, you have this conflict of jurisdiction between the Sharia court and the civil court. It's an ongoing discussion, and the tension goes on and on, because these are world legal systems and they have influenced the legal system of Nigeria, as it were. So now you have the Nigerian legal system, you have the laws, regulating even a dispute, it has to go to the court. Banker-customer relationship dispute, what court does it go, whether the federal high court or the state high court, it goes there. So you have the Sharia as well. Now, the judge sitting to adjudicate that dispute is not learning in Sharia. The judge doesn't know anything about Islamic finance. The judge will only apply rules of Islamic, rules of contract, basically, based on English contracts principles, not necessarily Sharia. Now, Malaysia has solved this in a different way by actually having a kind of Sharia advisory council, and they have reference to this particular council from the court. We don't have that yet in Nigeria. Now, how do we improve things? I really want to solve the problem from the very scratch. That's where we have to ensure, perhaps in the Sharia board, they should always have kind of somebody advising them. It may be a kind of an in-house lawyer or an external lawyer to try to help them to ensure that the ultimate decision, which is the fatwa, is not only Sharia compliant, but it's also viable within the legal system. And for this, you need Islamic finance law experts as much as possible. So this is something I feel it's important we have to look into. I remember structuring a product 2 years ago, a Sukuk product, which we issued globally. And what happened basically was, we have this jurisdiction that doesn't have the trust model, because Sukuk involve declaration of trust. So you have to declare, you have to have, because you have assets, you have to securitize. Now, this particular jurisdiction in the GCC doesn't have anything relating to this. So we have problems of enforceability. So we spoke with our Sharia committee. One of them was really adamant, insisting that no, he's not going to approve this product, because in this particular country, there is no structure of trust law there. So he says he's not going to approve it. Now, the remaining Sharia scholars approved it. So we had this tension. Then I had to conduct a session with them to explain the nature of law. That law doesn't mean it has to be what you have in the statute. Law doesn't mean it has to be the law in a statute book, that it has to be in a book, a kind of, you have Article 1, Section 2. No. Law actually can also be judicial precedents. So this is where we actually have to rely on judicial precedents and say this particular Sukuk contract will be enforceable by the courts in that country. So some of these little principles, they are known to all lawyers. I mean, those of you who are listening to me today. But some of the Sharia scholars who do not have law background may not understand them. So this is where we need to actually help them as much as possible. Because again, Islamic finance goes beyond just, I go to university to study Islamic finance. If you look at a typical Islamic finance curriculum, like when I was in the university, I mean, it entails everything. You have you study the Sharia part, you study the legal part, finance, even econometrics, economics, Islamic economics. It's a whole spectrum of different disciplines coming together as one. So this is where we need to all work together as Sharia scholars, as lawyers, as financial experts. Now, I give you an example of what you have when it comes to Islamic finance law practice globally. These are global law firms, and I can say they are like part of the top 10. You have Allen and Overy. I mean, that's actually one of our law firms we use for most of our deals. Latham and Watkins, Linklaters, Neil Miller actually is very strong when it comes to Islamic finance law. I mean, we've met several times when I was in Harvard in the US. He came for our Islamic finance forum there. And you have Baker and McKinsey. They all have Islamic finance practice. Now, I'm giving you this slide to just show you the current state of things globally. That all the top law firms, they have this. Then what about Nigeria? This is the thing. There's no harm. Don't worry, just put it your Islamic finance law practice. But again, it depends on how you market it to the country and to the region and to the globe itself. So this is very important. Top law firms, they all have Islamic finance law practice. They boast about their credentials, their expertise in terms of Sharia structuring. Now, when I say Sharia structuring, the role of lawyers in Islamic finance goes beyond just drafting agreements and that's all, or advising the clients. No, it includes even structuring products. So that's why lawyers are involved from the very beginning. When we come to structuring products, we have to keep testing the ideas, whether this can work under the law. How do we draft this? Will it be acceptable to the sukuk holders? So these are some of the things. So when you see some of these global law firms, you will see aspects of structuring. They have experience in banking, project finance, capital markets, restructuring, and Sharia compliant legal documents. They play a role in developing the market for Islamic finance products. You see somebody here, Neil Miller talks about playing a role in developing the market for Islamic finance products. Typically, you will say this is not the business of a lawyer. But a modern lawyer should really understand the basics of finance, the basics. How do you even price an Islamic finance product? How do you price a sukuk? So these are things that you have to be interested in. I don't know how. Okay, this thing just jumped. I have to go back here. I'm not here yet. Just a second. I have to go back. I don't know why it's going back. Okay, I'm going to end it and start again. Okay, what I was saying is, the traditional role of lawyers, basically, it's you just advise clients on whatever they bring to you. But now, the Islamic finance lawyers will have to play an active role. You don't wait for the clients to come to you. You have to keep contacting the clients to know what are the products, what are the new things they want to discuss, what are the new products they want to offer to customers. So this is something very important, and you help them to structure it. Once you get ideas, you put them in a legal form and offer it to them. So when it comes to product development, lawyers are involved from the very beginning. So that's the message you have to take from here. Therefore, if you have a law firm, there's no harm in actually including Islamic finance law practice. Now, there's a way to broaden your scope as well, because again, somebody will tell me soon that there are very few Islamic banks in Nigeria. So why should I introduce Islamic finance practice? I will tell you what to do shortly. Now, let's look at the role of law in enhancing the value proposition of Islamic finance. Now, when you talk about the value proposition of Islamic finance, it's more of the maqasid element, the maqasid sharia part. When I talk about maqasid, what is the main objective? Why do you have Islamic finance? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells you, when Allah was talking about, the ghanima, the war booties the Muslims actually get from the war. Allah talks about, Kila yakuna dawlatan bayna al-aghniyai minkum. You have to pay zakat, you have to give sadaqah, so that you don't have dawlatan bayna al-aghniyai minkum. You don't have what they call the oligarchic society, where only the rich are there. You have to help the poor. So this is how Islamic law bridges the gap. So the more you have, the more zakat you pay. If Allah blesses you with more money, and be ready to spend more. You should be ready to spend more. So if Allah blesses you with more money, it's not your money. Allah has given you money that belongs to others, added it in yours. So you have to pay. That's why Allah talks about wa'ati, that will koroba hakahu. It's hakahu. Hak here means the right. Give your kith and kin their own rights. Allah did not say just give them sadaqah, no. It's their right. And when I always recite this verse, wa'ati, that will koroba hakahu wal miskina ibn sabil Allah tabadhir, and you keep going on. It's something very, very important. If everybody takes care of their kith and kin, you will not have a beggar out there. I'm telling you, if we stick to some of these clear prescriptions from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the Quran. So when you talk about not having a kind of an oligarchic society, which is a society of the rich only, as much as possible, you've got to pay your zakat as and when due, 2.5%, which has to be done. And when you do that, it actually helps to bridge the gap between the rich and the poor. So when we come to the role of Islamic finance itself, the real value proposition of Islamic finance intermediation is to try to actually protect the 5 major maqasid sharia. Hifz al-nafs, that is life, hifz al-nasl, your protection of progeny, hifz al-mal, protection of wealth. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, I think Imam Ghazali mentioned it, that Allah just doesn't protect. Allah establishes these rights and protects them. So you have the right to own your property, but Allah protects that right by actually introducing rules regarding asarik. Anybody who steals, what do? You've got to actually give the punishment. So this is the way Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has introduced the whole concept. Now, when it comes to the role of law, the way you're going to understand this slide is, as lawyers or law itself, how do you help to enhance the value proposition of Islamic finance, to enhance what Islamic finance seeks to offer to the world? And I'm starting from the prohibition-driven to social objective. This is my concept dimension. We have been focusing more and more on the prohibition. Yeah, this is what they call the negative screens or negative screening. This is riba, it's haram. Haram, this, haram. What do you have to offer to the world? If a non-Muslim comes to you, we have so many non-Muslims in Nigeria, they say, can you offer us Islamic finance? How will you offer them Islamic finance? What is that value in it? So this is where we have to really understand the underlying philosophy of it itself. We have to actually gradually move from the prohibition-driven aspect to the social objective, which is the maqasid dimension. Prohibition is very important, don't get me wrong. Riba will remain forbidden. I'm not the Azhari scholars, Sheikh Abdurrahman, Muhammad Abdurrahman. I'm not the Azhari scholars who will actually say, riba is halal. No, we've had all sorts of fatwas from, from Sheikh al-Azhar previously. Riba, gharar, and all these, they are haram. Yes, and we have to enforce Islamic finance accordingly. However, we have to go beyond that by looking at the positive screenings. And this is where we talk about what is the social objective. Will Islamic finance, how can we use Islamic finance to alleviate poverty? This is a social dimension to it. Again, banks will tell you, I'm a realist. I have to be realistic. It's not their business. It's not my business, to actually go for, poverty alleviation. But again, the good thing is most of the banks in Nigeria, the Islamic banks, have introduced foundations. And the foundations are performing that role, which is highly commendable. It's highly commendable. I watch the news all the time. Even during the pandemic, many of them reached out to poor families across the country. So this is something commendable. So we have to just move from the negative screening, though it's important and we have to still enforce it, but we have to add the positive screening part, making impact on the society. For instance, a bank, an Islamic bank in Nigeria should not be funding a project that destroys the environment. An Islamic bank, before you give the financing, you have to ask them to submit the environmental impact assessment. You should enforce this. We should avoid funding projects that will pollute the environment. And this is where the SDGs come in. But again, be careful. When I say the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, there are some that are a bit tricky. I'm not saying they are all Sharia compliant. I'm not here to endorse the UN Sustainable Development Goals, but there are some that are actually related to the maqasid sharia that are very important. Then the governance part is very important when it comes to governance. I've spoken about corporate and Sharia governance, and I think it's important. We have to quickly rush. I think I only have 40 minutes, I'm told. Now, the other part is law can be used to enforce financial consumer protection. An example of this is what you have in Malaysia in IFSA, the Islamic Financial Services Act 2013, where there is a whole section on consumer protection. Even the way you advertise your products, they insist that you have to have what you call the PDS. PDS means the product disclosure sheet. It has to be there. If you're offering like Moraba transaction for financing cars, or houses, you have to make it very clear. Whatever it's based on which contract, and even the mechanisms of the pricing. How did you derive the profit rate? You have to declare everything upfront and put it there on the website. So the law itself regulates this. So this is very important. I mean, when it comes to the rule of law and even the lawyers. Now, finally, you talk about the dispute management part. Again, there's a difference between dispute avoidance and dispute resolution. I always tell people, people ask me, why do you now use dispute management? Before I did my postdoctoral research, I was using dispute resolution, just like any other person. But at the end of that research, after a whole year, I started saying dispute management. Some of the professors were asking me, what happened to you? Now we have to now move gradually from dispute resolution, just backtrack a bit, explore dispute avoidance. How do you avoid a dispute from happening? And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given us classical principles in the Quran. The longest verse of the Quran, Ayatul Dain. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala talks about there, your lady amanu, إِذَا تَدَيَّنْتُمْ بِدَيْنٍ إِلَى أَجَلٍ مُسَمَّى فَاكْتُبُوهُ. I mean, you see, that is the whole essence of legal documentation. Write it down. This is coming from our creator, that if you're entering into a future kind of contracts or a loan contract, make sure you document it. Allah is telling us this. And this is the longest verse in the Quran. And that's why scholars actually call it Ayatul Dain, the verse of the debt. Yeah. It's the longest verse of the Quran. And it's in Surah Al-Baqarah, just before you go to the last verse. I mean, so this verse actually tells you the whole concept of legal documentation, which actually helps you to avoid disputes. Once you draft your contract properly, all the terms are clear, then you'll be able to avoid so many disputes. This is the whole concept of dispute avoidance. I've just given you one. There are many other kind of evidence you have in the Quran and Sunnah that support dispute avoidance. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells you again, don't eat up the property amongst yourself in falsehood. Except for what? Except for a situation where you have a kind of meeting of minds. There's consent from the parties. Now, if there's no consent, then the contract is voidable ultimately. It's even void ab initio. So this is what we're trying to say. There are so many of these concepts in the Quran and Sunnah that support whatever we're doing. So it was after that research I did, I started talking about dispute management. So you hardly hear me just saying dispute resolution. You start from dispute avoidance. How do you avoid those disputes? Now, if the disputes still arise later, what do? You go for resolution. So this is the whole concept itself. And let me quickly round up. I think I have a few more minutes, but I've got a lot to say. And I think this part is very, very important. Now we've identified the issues. Let's go into the challenges. Because again, this is what the organizers asked me to say. I have to discuss the issues, challenges, then opportunities. I hope you give me some more time. Now, when it comes to challenges, yes, I do admit, because again, I know some of this will come during the Q&A. There are a lot of challenges. The traditional understanding of legal practice, litigation. If you're not doing litigation, your family may even tell you, you don't know what you're doing. You have to always go with your wig and gown. I don't even know where my wig and gown is now. I mean, I threw it away over 10 years ago. Yeah, and I'm still in legal practice. Yeah, and making more money in the legal practice than now. So, I mean, law is not only, I mean, I know many of you know this, but again, this is the traditional understanding. When people don't see you going to the court, they say, what's wrong with you? You know, so we have to change it. When it comes to Islamic finance, litigation is important. And we need people specializing in Islamic finance litigation. I've written a lot about this before. It's very important, and I've identified certain principles we have to watch, but I'm not going to discuss that today. but we have to explore other areas. Now, number two challenge is the few non-interest banks we have in Nigeria. This is something we have. We can count them, and some of them are here with us today. Again, when they are few, the market is small. Lawyers have to make money. Yeah, so I'm a realist, so I have to really tell you, lawyers have to make money. So if we're encouraging lawyers to develop this area of practice, where is the market for them? So this is a big challenge. So we have to be creative. How to be creative, we'll come back to this when we explore the opportunities. Now, the dearth of experts in Islamic finance. This is something very important. I have to be sincere with you. Islamic finance cannot be learned by attending a one-week training. No. No, you cannot actually be an expert in Islamic finance by attending a 1 week or even a 1 month training. No, you have to study it as you study other courses. So this is something very important. I know we have many people claiming they're experts in Islamic finance in Nigeria. I do know we have very few experts. Again, there are other experts people don't really see, even in the country today, particularly the Sharia experts. Many who go to Medina, who go to, Al-Azhar, they come back to the country. They are very sound in fiqh muamalat. Those are actually treasure trove we can explore to develop Islamic finance. But some of them end up teaching in secondary school, in primary schools, unfortunately. Now, I'm saying this because I've seen many of them. I've taught many of them at the master's and PhD level when I was in the university. And some of them are even Nigerians. So I see some of them, they are very smart. So we should really develop this. They are there. We have that treasure trove in the country already. Now, we also have this skepticism within the Muslim community. Some do not believe in Islamic finance. People feel, oh, no, there's nothing wrong with interest. It's the same. This is not riba. This is not usury. They try to differentiate between usury and interest. So this is another part where I think we need more advocacy. And I know the banks are doing a lot. The Islamic banks in the country today, they are still doing a lot to educate people. But again, you still have that skepticism, and that affects the market itself. If you have skepticism, then lawyers will not have job to do when it comes to Islamic finance law practice. Religious sensitivities, again, is another thing. You have this issue. When you introduce Islamic finance, people think you're Islamizing the country. This has been a big issue, and it's not. And I'm happy when I read a report a few years ago that, even those who buy the sukuk, we have many non-Muslims buying the sukuk. We have many non-Muslims having accounts in some of the Islamic banks we have in the country. And finally, MBA's Institute for Continuing Legal Education. We do have the Institute for Continuing Legal Education at the Nigerian Bar Association, sorry. Here in Malaysia, we have Bar Council, sorry. In Nigeria, we have Nigeria Bar Association, so I get confused. Now, they actually work with accountants, ICANN and others to develop specialized training programs with ICANN so that lawyers will know some of the basic principles of accounting. What about Islamic finance law? So this is something I feel it's timely. We should explore actually introducing this at the Institute for Continuing Legal Education. Now, opportunities, this is the sweet part. Developing a core team for thought leadership and innovative product development. You see, if you want to break into the market, I always tell people have to know you. Yes, we have rules regulating how to advertise your legal practice in Nigeria. You cannot just go to the TV. Unlike the United States, you go to the TV, you switch on your TV, you see lawyers advertising. They tell you, did you take Panadol and you're having headache? If you're having headache, contact us. It's for them to sue the company manufacturing Panadol for you. Ambulance chasing. Ambulance chasing, they look at people who have accidents and immediately they sue. This is very common. People do advertise in those jurisdictions. But in Nigeria, we have a different kind of structure where you are highly restricted. But how do you do it? Publish thought leadership on Islamic finance law. Identify issues. You are not advertising. You are just actually writing and putting your name and use the name of your firm somewhere and claiming expertise of this. And before you know it, people will come to you. Innovative product development, again, I think this aspect is very important. You can be sharing one product maybe every month, and have a very good website where you put all this. Gradually, people will get to know you. And some of these products may not just be new. They may actually be products in other jurisdictions. You feel that these products can be used in Nigeria as well. Number two, proactive engagement with halal firms to structure corporate sukuk. Now, we've not really had a lot of corporate sukuk in Nigeria. We've been having the sovereign sukuk, the FGN sukuk, and the Ocean State sukuk. We need corporate sukuk. And once you have so many corporate sukuk across the country, lawyers will make a lot of money. I can tell you, for structuring one sukuk here, lawyers get paid. I can tell you, it's a public, I don't know. I don't know who is here and who is not here. I want to restrict what I'm saying. Some lawyers get paid up to 150,000 US dollars. 150,000 US dollars for structuring one sukuk. Yes. So the more corporate sukuk you have, the more companies like Dangote companies and others, the more they actually go into the market, to the capital market to raise funds, the more lawyers will have a lot of jobs to do, basically. So this is something very important. But again, for you to be able to do that, you have to engage with them. You have to tell them it's possible to do it. And this is not rocket science. It's very simple. It's even simpler than the FGN sukuk. I mean, in terms of structuring, because you don't need additional guarantees. And I mean, there are ways we handle this. You don't even need to have SPVs outside the country. You can have all these structures done within the country. So another thing is beyond Islamic finance, exploring the entire spectrum of halal economy. This is very important. Again, I mentioned this earlier on. We talk about Islamic finance all the time. What about the halal economy? We talk about halal meat, halal this, halal that. This is really booming in countries like Brazil that are really even non-Muslims. They export halal meat all over the world. Now, these halal firms and halal companies will need financing from the banks, from Islamic banks. They will need lawyers to advise them. That's where you actually get your work done. So it's always good to actually expand your practice beyond just Islamic finance, even for those of you who are already practicing this. You've got to try to focus on the halal economy as well. And it's huge when it comes to the Nigerian environment. Now, the next one is embracing the new normal. How do you collaborate with fintech startups? Again, I had the opportunity of interviewing some young lawyers recently for positions in my company, and I was testing them. Do you know contract iPod? Do you know how to automate the review of a legal document? No. I was surprised. I said, guys, you are young. You have to know all this. Fintech, financial technology is very important. Lawyers should move away from the traditional practice. Don't practice partially online and communicating with your clients online. With lockdown, you are locked down in your homes. Use Zoom to communicate with your clients and continue your work. Now, there are a lot of things you can do with fintech. I don't have time to discuss that today because I think I need to run up soon. Regional and global practice, I think this is very important. Go beyond Nigeria. Think of West Africa, particularly the Muslim countries in West Africa. Ghana, you have the Muslim part where you have a lot of Hausas as well and Fulanis. So you can actually try to see if you can expand your practice to those areas and offer them something Islamic. Islamic finance, that's why I mentioned halal economy. You have cooperatives now, Islamic cooperatives springing up all over the country, and they are doing very well. They have different products. They are not necessarily Islamic banks. They are not takaful institutions, but they are cooperatives. So you have a lot. You can work with some of these cooperatives. You can help some of these traders to organize themselves into Sharia compliant cooperatives, transform them from the normal cooperative they are doing to the Sharia compliant one. And finally, collaborating with global firms. This is the most juicy part. Number 6, we do get legal opinions from all over the world whenever we're issuing a global sukuk to know whether our sukuk contract will be enforceable. And to do this, one thing we actually do is we do pay them for a legal opinion of 3, 4, 5 pages. We pay them for it. So as much as possible, you can actually position yourself, include Islamic finance practice in your website or whatever, and make sure you claim expertise of it and make sure you are an expert actually, because nobody will send you kind of a request to write a legal opinion and you write trash because you're not an expert in it. So you've got to actually make sure you train yourself and you can do it. Now, most of those law firms I showed you earlier, sometimes they need law firms in some of the developing countries to write legal opinions on specific issues. And this is where they will have to search. Everybody goes online today. Oh, I need a legal opinion in Nigeria. What law firm? Nigeria, Islamic finance law. I'll just Google. I'll Google it. And if you don't put that on your website, how will I know you're an expert? So it's always good to collaborate with them and claim that position that you are the Islamic finance law expert in Nigeria. For anything coming from abroad, they should actually send it to you. You'll be able to give opinions for it, and you make your money. I'm getting to the end gradually, so I'll just summarize this because I need to end. Islamic finance law, my proposition here is to have, to start with what you call the Islamic Finance Law Forum, and later perhaps you're going to have a section on Islamic finance law. These are the existing sections and fora we have at the moment at the Nigerian Bar Association. I know the bar elections are coming in the next coming days, lawyers. Many of us will be voting for the next national executives for the Nigerian Bar Association. So you should vote wisely. But one thing I would like to say basically, it's these are the existing one, Women's Forum, you know, let's have Islamic Finance Law Forum as much as possible. I'm not in the country to push for this, but I believe there are very active lawyers in the country who can push for this. But again, as much as possible, if I'm able to engage with the new ESCO one way or the other online, I will inform them we need to develop this. So this is a forum where we'll be able to establish some courses, and as much as possible, we'll train a lot of lawyers to be able to, you know, claim expertise of Islamic finance law. And we can collaborate with some institutions in Malaysia and elsewhere to offer specialized courses online and offline for lawyers in Nigeria. So this is something I feel is very important going forward. I hope this will happen in the next coming years. And that's it. Now, let me give you this case study before I end. Moderator, this is, I think, the penultimate slide. So I'm going to end soon. I know I'm going beyond my time. Now, I'm not endorsing this particular firm. So I've told you this, but it's an example of an integrated kind of global Islamic finance firm. It's not even an Islamic finance law firm. It's an Islamic finance firm. So if you have time, you can just go to their website, see what they do, and see how you can replicate. This is what I tell people. Replicate or learn from them to improve your own practice. They deal with banking and finance, business recovery, almost everything, waqf and philanthropy, because all these are very important. Now, if you talk about waqf, somebody will ask me, will I make money from doing waqf? If I'm a law firm here, I would say yes. Every waqf is created by a waqf deed. It's a deed. And where you're going to identify the parties, it's a deed. So you're going to make money from it, definitely. Not only that, if you're entrusted as the mutawalli or the trustee of the waqf property, you can get paid for your services as well. So these are areas. And this global law firm, Gateway, actually, if you look at the team, they started there, most of them are in the UK, but they have spread their tentacles across the world. They have lawyers, finance experts, accountants, auditors, Sharia scholars all over the world. This is an example. So this is a different business model going beyond just a law firm, where you're gonna have an integrated kind of firm, which is not just a law firm. So this case study, I think, is very important. It's new. And if you look at the names of those behind this, they are real experts. Some of them are former CEOs of Islamic banks across the world. So it's not just people coming together they are top people. If you look at the names, I know many of them. I know the founder. We are in a WhatsApp group together. They are doing very well. So again, I'm suggesting this kind of thing to Nigeria. You have chartered accountants, you have lawyers, you have Sharia scholars. Can these three people come together to establish a firm that will serve the Islamic finance industry in Nigeria better? So these are some of the things we are suggesting. Now, finally, let me see, what is this? Okay, this is just something I would like to say again. If you talk about lawyers and their role, this is the last thing before I go into the conclusion. I never knew it was here, but again, I'll just explain it since it's here already. Now, what I'm trying to say here is when you actually want to design a dispute management framework for an Islamic bank or for Islamic banks in the country, this is the framework I designed. And from the beginning, from the macro level up to the micro level, lawyers are involved in the whole process. Sharia department or whatever. So lawyers have a lot of role to play, whether as in-house lawyers or external lawyers. I don't think I have enough time to explain this, but perhaps you can read up later because I need to end. This is proper legal documentation and procedures at the macro level. Claims, complaints, this has to be ensured by the central bank at the macro level by creating enabling laws. That goes into the bank. At the bank level, we propose having a muhtasib. Muhtasib is what you call an ombudsman. Ombudsman is based on a concept in the Quran, al-amru bil ma'ruf wa nahy anil munkar, enjoining good and forbidding evil. This is something you had during the time of the Prophet. Even the Prophet, Sayyidina Ali, Sayyidina Umar, they were all, they played the role of muhtasib throughout to ensure that things are done properly. So banks can have this. So you have this early neutral evaluation by Sharia department. You've got the Sharia non-compliance department, Sharia department, the Sharia audit department. They have their own function to do to ensure that they prevent sadadaria. They prevent any evil, any harm to the customers as well. You should know at the Sharia audit department, I know they are familiar with all this. You are not only protecting the bank, you are also protecting these customers as well. The mediation, again, when there are disputes, customer not satisfied, ultimately you can have an industry level dispute management mechanism. Particularly in Nigeria, you can have an industry level dispute management mechanism, like the financial ombudsman scheme. This is available in many countries in the UK, in Australia, and Malaysia has established this many years ago as well. You can have it, and it's a consortium of all the banks. Now, the Islamic banks in Nigeria, though few, they can come together to have this so that they have a Sharia compliant process of resolving the disputes. You can easily use the model from other countries and try to adapt it to the Nigerian system. All this will be handled by lawyers and Sharia scholars. Okay, finally, let me just share my concluding thoughts within a minute so that I can just end it here. Again, I have mentioned specialization in Islamic finance law as an academic discipline is very important. So for those of you who are academics, you can choose to specialize in this if you're a lawyer. And the next one is the legal practice. Lawyers who are in-house lawyers or external lawyers should develop this aspect. It's very important. And bridging the gap again between the academics and the industry experts, I've seen this a lot because again, I have been in the academia. I left there as an associate professor. Now in the industry, I've been in industry for years. Now I see the big gap between the theories we teach in the academia most of the time and what we do in the industry. So let's try to bridge this gap by working together. And how do you do it? Islamic banks in Nigeria, JAIS, TAJ, and others, give research grants to these professors in the universities. If you have any problem, give research grants, announce it, and tell them you want them to solve this problem for you. And we're gonna give you this grant for the research. And you give them some money to do it. With that, you can bridge the gap. Lawyers to expand their legal practice, I've mentioned this a lot. Let's be innovative. Let's come up with new aspects. We should be able to structure structure products. So law firms should have their structuring teams who can structure Islamic finance products for Islamic banks as part of their product development process. And finally, you should explore the possibility of integrated legal practice as we discussed. I gave you the example of Gateway. You can decide to come together and form a consortium of accountants, lawyers, and I mean, these are, again, subject to the rules of the professional bodies. There are specific rules guiding this kind of partnerships. So if you do this, I hope you're going to have a number of opportunities and you'll be able to do better, inshallah. I hope I've not bored you today, and I thank the organizers. May Allah bless you all. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
وعليكم السلام ورحمة الله وبركاته.
I apologize. Assalamu alaikum. Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can.
Oh, I'm so sorry about that. Jazakumullah khairan, Doctor, for your presentation. I resisted disturbing your session so that I don't get pulled through in pure water at me for disturbing you, because I noticed the body language for everyone. Everyone was engrossed with the presentation. So alhamdulillah, Jazakumullah khairan, barakallahu fi. I'd like to tweak the model a bit. We won't take questions and answers immediately. I do hope that you don't mind, Doctor. Would like to take presentations from the banks so that they would have hopefully reflected on your presentation and incorporated into their pitch, because really what they're going to do for us is give us a pitch of their banks. And then after that, we can take questions so that the participants can then have robust, objective questions to ask, inshallah. Is that okay by you, sir? Okay, alhamdulillah. So Mr. Mohammed Murtala Abdurrahman, he is the representative of Jaiz Bank PLC. He works as a Sharia audit officer. The floor is open to you now to give a very short presentation in the light of what we've been discussing, Islamic law, how it has affected your operations, your product servicing. Basically pitch to us, Mr. Mohammed Abdurrahman.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Thank you, the moderator. Permit me to start by commending the organizer of this discussion. Precisely, I am glad to meet with a colleague of mine who, for a few years, we have lost contact. But alhamdulillah, we are listening to him live and direct now. I'm talking of Dr. Umar Hosseini. Going back to the main, the center of the discussion today, the topic is apt, and I cannot but to admit with what Dr. Umar has said. We all are aware that if you talk of Islamic finance in Nigeria, alhamdulillah, it has come to stay. Although we have a lot of issues that, of course, we need to battle with, just like the Malaysia has battled with their own before they were able to stay to that extent. As we are aware, even from what Dr. Umar said in the presentation, Islamic finance is made up of three spheres. One is Islamic bank, then Takafu, then we have Islamic capital markets. So, alhamdulillah, in Nigeria, even with these few years of taking effect, we are able to see the three spheres at the same time. Now, currently, we have three banks: Islamic Bank, then we have Takaful, and now we have issued three sovereign sukuk. So, alhamdulillah, this is a development. However, to me, we are still having challenges, just as enumerated by Dr. Umar Hosseini. And for me, I think as Muslim lawyers, as stakeholders in the sector, we need to also develop ourselves in terms of knowledge and practice. How do I mean by this? I can say for the past few years, Jaiz Bank has, the major challenge is we need to sensitize people to understand what we do. And this cannot be overemphasized. As a matter of fact, few months ago, I was involved in the committee that met with a lot of people, discussed with some scholars, local scholars, because they need to understand what you are doing. They need to understand and have confidence in what you are doing. Of course, alhamdulillah, based on the regulation, based on the circular, based on even the issue, the fatwa issued by our ACE members, we cannot breach the provision of Sharia. Alhamdulillah, I can say this. Of course, we have our hudu, because we need to also ensure that what we are selling to the people is actually what we are doing. And what are we selling? We are selling Islamic products. We are selling Islamic service. So, however, the experience so far, for me, the lawyers, we have a lot of work to do, just as Dr. Umar said, in the sense that as we speak now, even though the Islamic banks in Nigeria are very, very few, but if you compare the population to what we have on ground, we still have a long way to go. We have a long way to go, in the sense that if the customer that walk into the bank for facility or financing, you have to sit him down and also explain to him what you need to sign. And having done that, you can't just be signing and leave. You also allow him to understand the content of what he signed. This is the provision of Sharia. And in most cases, most of them are eager to sign and get what they want to get. But Sharia said the two parties must understand the content of the agreement that they are entering into. So when you now have issue, what you now see is, you see what Dr. Umar called that as the knowledge gap. Some lawyer will write you, and he'll be using the same understanding of conventional bank, that you have charged my customer so amount of money, is against blah 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 blah. But he failed to understand that the product that we are using quite different from what conventional banks are using. And for me, it's a way that we need to also bounce up to this responsibility. Also, part of what I want to discuss or pick from what Dr. Umar has said and hammer on is the issue of the regulation. I hope people are hearing me, because I think there is.
Yes, please go ahead. You have about
Okay.
a minute left. Please round up so that we can take other presenters.
So we also need to understand that even when you want to resolve dispute, of course, for me, dispute will surely happen. It will happen. But how are we going to resolve it? We need to also understand that Sharia has also set certain principle and procedure we need to adopt. But most lawyers will not even understand it. Let me just use just one point or one scenario just to capture it. If you give a particular case, a particular file to a lawyer that this is the case at hand, just look at it and ensure that you help the bank out. The customer, the bank, the lawyer will write the customer, and we're using the terminology of conventional bank. You are hereby request to pay so plus interest. And if that thing should go out without the lawyer, in-house lawyer from the Islamic bank check it very well, it will affect the nature of the transaction that you are trying to get, because the customer will just challenge that you are not to profit on interest. So this is a knowledge gap that I'm thinking for lawyers in Nigeria. We need to also, it's an avenue for us to also invest on and be able to get the market from. This is just my own contribution, and I'll be open for any other question that you may have for me. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Straight to the point. So, inshallah ta'ala, we'll take reflections from Mr. Taslim Olajuwon Akosile. He is the Sharia Non-Compliance Product Development Officer with Taj Bank. So, Brother Taslim, what we need you to do for us, you've listened to Doctor's presentation, and of course, you know how you operate at Taj Bank. You need to pitch to us now. We are ready to work with you as lawyers. We are also your customers. So let us know what challenges you're facing and where to meet in the middle, basically. You have 5 minutes. Brother Slim. Hello, Brother Slim, are you there? Barrister Kazim.
Okay. Bismillah, Alhamdulillah, Alhamdulillah, Wassalam ala Nabiya. Assalamu alaikum wa barakatuh. Hello, I'm there. Can you hear me?
Yes. Please go ahead. We can hear you.
Hello, can you hear me?
Brother Taslim, please go ahead. We can hear you.
Hello. Hello.
Brother Taslim, we can hear you.
Okay. Hello.
Your network might have a poor connection.
Thank you very much. Just as first of all, I want to thank Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. I want to thank Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for this opportunity. I met. Okay. Can you hear me now? Hello.
Yes, please go ahead. Just go ahead.
Hello, can you hear me now? Hello.
Please go ahead. While we hear, just go ahead. Brother Taslim. Hello, Brother Slim. Okay, perhaps he has a bit of challenge or glitch from his end. Will Brother Barrister Kosim, can you reach out to him and see if he can reconnect, if that's possible? So we take the next presenter. Is that okay?
It's all right.
All right, then, inshallah, Mr. Babatunde Abdulghani Adegbindi, he's the manager, business development unit at Lotus Capital Limited. So he'll also be talking to us in the light of the challenges they face legally with respect to product structuring, attending to customers in this Islamic finance space. Brother Abdulghani, it's your turn. You have 5 minutes for your presentation.
Thank you very much. Can you hear me, please?
Absolutely, clearly, yes.
Naam. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Alhamdulillah, 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 Rabbil Alameen. Thank you so much. And I like your choice of word. You said pitch, and that is exactly what I intend to do. However, I would like to latch on to something Dr. Husseini said. A very fantastic presentation, I must say. Well done, sir. Something you said, you asked the question, you said, Islamic finance itself, what do we have to offer? Also, you mentioned value. And I want to tie those two together. What does Islamic finance have to offer in terms of value? Now, there is no how you can talk about value if you don't separate wants and needs. Now, a lot of customers or clients or staff, there's a mix between want and need. And as a practitioner or an Islamic finance person who wants to deliver value, an alternative to the conventional finance, you need to be able to profile your clients with discussion to identify their needs. Now, when the needs is identified, then it can lead and help product development. And that is why I'm going to mention that for Lotus Capital Limited, we are a full-fledged service Islamic finance firm. We've been around for over 14 years, registered by the Securities and Exchange Commission, that is SEC. And for these over 14 years, we have contributed to the Nigerian capital market. A very good example is in the last 3 sovereign sukuk that has been raised. We are financial advisors to the federal government of Nigeria for the last 3 sovereign sukuk. We're also financial advisors to the Osun sukuk and so many other transactions that we have done. Particularly, in the stock market, we have 3 mutual funds. First is what you call the Halal Investment Fund. We also have what you call the Halal Fixed Income Fund. And we have what you call the Lotus Equity Traded Fund. That is, we call it the ETF. Now, let me briefly say 1 or 2 things on those 3. Now, I'm saying this in tie to value, as mentioned by Dr. Omar. What value are you creating? Now, when you come to value and you're talking about Islamic finance, you can't run away from that hadith, very sahih hadith, that said that one of the things that you'll be asked about on the day of Qiyamah is how did you make your money? How did you make your money and how did you spend it? And that is tied to what I'm going to say. For Lotus Capital, we are concerned about how do you make your money.
Brother Abdulghani, please 1 minute. I would like to address the house. We have some interferences. Some of the mics are on mute. Kindly mute your mic so that the presenter can, get across to us. Please, I beg you for the sake of Allah. Brother Abdulghani, please continue.
All right, thank you very much, the moderator. So I was saying there's a sound hadith that says one of the questions mankind will be asked on the day of reckoning is how did you make your money and how are you spending it? And that is a major focus for us at Lotus Capital Limited. As Muslims, how are you making your money? Money is just a tool, but the world now is subjected to being servants of money. Meanwhile, you are supposed to be the controller of money, to direct money where you want it. So our focus is how do you make your money in a halal way? According to Surah Al-Baqarah, there's a difference between haram, that is riba, and trade. He said you can do trade, but don't do riba. What is trade? Buy and sell, which is the foundation of every Islamic finance, Islamic transaction or product. So for the halal fixed income, this is a product that is a mutual fund. I was happy when Dr. Umar mentioned one of the things the Prophet ﷺ brought to life was how do you do transaction with mutual understanding, mutual agreement. And when you say mutual, it means you and I, everybody involved, contribute and agree to use certain money for certain transactions so that you can share the profit as it comes in. So for the Lotus halal fixed income fund is a mutual fund where people contribute funds. Now, these funds are used to finance Islamic transactions, be it Ijara related, Murabaha, Mudaraba, Islamic financial transactions. And when we make the profit from these transactions, now 80% of those profits is shared to the customers every 90 days as dividend. Now 20% goes back so that there can be capital appreciation. You know, so what you have put in is not the same thing you are pulling out when you are exiting, because profit has been made. But because we don't want to push out all the profit, we give 80% every 90 days to the investors, and 20% goes back into the fund for capital appreciation. Then the second one is what you call the Lotus Halal Investment Fund. And the Lotus Halal Investment Fund is also a mutual fund. It's a mutual fund, but we have some category of clients that are risk averse. They want to play in the stock market. They are ready to take risks, especially the young ones. So we created a balanced fund, meaning that this Lotus Halal Investment Fund is balanced. It has three major components. There's the stock part, there's the asset-backed finance, and there's the real estate finance. Meaning that every fund in this, every money in this fund is used to do three of these things in a balanced way. So if one part is not making so much money, the other part cushions the effect. And over the years, we have seen the performance. It started at 1 naira, today is at 1 naira 21 kobo. So as these things go on, you see that the construction or the structure of Islamic finance product is definitely different from the conventional, because for Islamic finance, it is backed by an asset. If there is no asset and there's no agreement, there's no transaction. So if these things, if the conventional tells you, I bring 20,000 and over 2 years, you will pay me 8%. For us, it's not about percentage, it's about the profit. When you bring in your money, it goes into Islamic financial transactions. The profit it makes, we share as you have contributed. May Allah make it better understood than having said it. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Jazakumullah khairan for that. Straight to the point, Pete. Barakallahu feek. I wonder if you're considering corporate sukuk, as Dr. Omar mentioned, so if perhaps you want to explore that area. Let's give the floor now to Brother Taslim, Taj Bank. Brother Taslim, are you there?
Yes, assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Can you hear me now?
Yes, absolutely. Wa alaikum salam. Please go ahead. 5 minutes.
Sorry, I had a network challenge the other time, so I quickly had to rectify. So, Bismillah, alhamdulillah, because of the time, I would try to be as brief as possible. As I mentioned some times back, when we look at the Islamic finance and economic system, you can split it into two. You have the business angle and you have the welfare angle. So Dr. Umar Husseini's presentation is holistic. First, I didn't want to spend much time greeting my learned seniors, Dr. Umar, Malam, Abdurrahman, and the rest of them. There is no time for that. We always meet online. So Dr. Umar has covered the field, the business angle of Islamic finance. You talk about the banking, the takaful, the wealth management. Then you look at the welfare arm of Islamic finance and economic system. You talk about the Waqf, the Zakat, the Qard Hassan, and the rest of them. And I think another angle or another aspect is the fact that yes, it's an emerging industry, as it has been severally articulated by Dr. Umar, and it is laden with huge opportunities for lawyers in the area of legal documentation, among others. Also, lawyers need to start working towards thought leadership. That has also been articulated by Dr. Umar. Then the third angle, that's the challenge, the aspect of the challenge. Lawyers need to, there's no gain saying the fact that our legal educational system is too restricted. And that makes me to remember a monograph that was put together by NAMLAS in the time past. Dr. Omar Husseini will remember what I'm referring to, because he was the engineer of that monograph of Professor A. Oba, Abdulmumini Adebayo Oba, where he wrote about lawyers, legal education, and all of that in Nigeria. So he made it clear in that in that is article turned monograph subsequently. The fact that our legal education is too restricted in favor only of the common law system to the exclusion of even the Sharia, which precedes the common law system within the Nigerian terrain. So unfortunately, you found most universities not paying attention to the Sharia education. The Sharia education has been relegated to the background like any other thing that has to do with Islam and Muslims, unfortunately for us. But I think it is time we start looking at the need to reconfigure our legal educational system to give the Sharia education more priority, so that you come up or you end up training lawyers who are versatile in several or in multiple legal education, in multiple legal systems, so to say. So once we work on that, then we also need to start looking at, still under the legal education, you talk about even the vocational legal institutions like the Nigerian Law School. You know, though the Nigerian Law School tries to bring in the Sharia education, but as little as it is, they also need to expand more on that. It is when you have lawyers who are well grounded in the common law and the Sharia, who are rounded in these aspects, that you'll be able to produce lawyers that can be that can produce or that can provide adequate service to the Islamic finance industry in Nigeria. Also under that, there's also the need to emphasize more on industry talks or industry forum, where you bring together the Sharia scholars, the Islamic finance practitioners. So you try to bridge the gap, as it has been done in Malaysia successfully, between the academia and the industry. Though realizing the fact that in Nigeria generally there seems to be that wide gap between our academia and the industry generally. But for us to achieve for us to advance in Islamic finance, we need to quickly work on the need to bridge the gap between the Islamic finance academic or the academia and the industry. I hope I'm still within time.
I was actually going to, I need to round off, please, so that we can start to take our questions. Yes.
That said, on the whole, in summary, there is need to
Bertha Slim. But I think your network is no longer cooperating. Bertha Slim, I don't know if you can hear me, but your network is no longer cooperating. Bertha Slim, please help us step in so you can mute him. Bertha Slim, please mute Bertha Slim so we can make progress, inshallah.
Okay.
All right, Jazakumullah khairan to all our presenters, and I am sure that we have more that you want to share with us, but time is not our friend.
So we need to start looking at.
Assalamu alaikum. Okay. Brother Qasim, are you there, please?
Yes.
All right, so are we okay with Brother Slim now? Has he been contacted?
I think he's having challenges with network.
Yes, with his network. Yeah, that's why. Let's just move ahead to the question and answers, and hopefully, if time permits, during the conclusions, we can have the closing conclusion talk, inshallah. That's okay by you. But our Qasim, permission to progress into the Q&A. Brother Qasim, can we move into the Q&A now?
I don't think so.
We can continue now. All right, inshallah ta'ala, to pass your questions, you can drop the questions in the chat box. We will take them in order. At the moment, there are no questions for now. The chat box has been open for a while now, but there are no questions. Brother Sadiq has a question. After Brother Sadiq, this person says, Noordin Abdul Salam from Ilorin also has a question and a remark. So, Brother Sadiq, you have the floor. Please make your questions short and concise. I beg you for last sake. Make it short and concise. You have 30 seconds to ask a question. Brother Sadiq. If you're not there, then Noordin Abdul Salam from Ilorin, you have a question and a remark. Please keep your question very straight to the point and your remarks also concise. We do not have a lot of time. Noordin Abdul Salam from Ilorin, you have the floor. Noordin Abdul Salam. Okay, I don't know if these people are not present at the moment. I have Olushola Ibrahim. He's asking Dr. Hussein, do I have your attention, please? Dr. Hussein.
Okay, thank you very much for the questions, and I'd like to thank the speakers just now. The question from I'm just trying to read the Lushala Ibrahim regarding awareness of Islamic means of trading and transaction. They want to know my thoughts about this. I should talk more about this. Well, awareness is actually awareness, basically. I mean, we have to continue to do awareness. I didn't talk about awareness, because my focus was actually the Muslim lawyers or the lawyers specializing in Islamic finance. And if you want to talk more on this, yes, I can do that. But one thing you have to know is we need to keep doing the awareness. It's not only the banks themselves that should do the awareness, why people should actually trade in accordance with Islamic law. The scholars, we have to do it as well. I mean, there's no harm in an imam during khutbah, actually giving a khutbah on why riba is prohibited. This is something important. We shouldn't just shy away from the economic aspect of Islam. It's part and parcel of our lives. So if you're an imam in a masjid, there's no harm in speaking on riba and why people should trade. Even if you have a shop somewhere in the country, you should trade in accordance with Islam. When people actually come to buy things, from you and they are going to pay later, don't ask them to pay more. I mean, these are things you can do even at the individual level, not just the banks. I think we have that responsibility, to actually propagate, the principles of Islamic finance, Islamic economics, and why people should live the halal lifestyle as much as possible. So I think it's for everybody, it's everybody's role, and it's a continuous thing. It's not something that the banks alone can do. But it's a very important question, and I think it's good we actually start doing that, even during podcasts, inshallah. Shukran.
All right, Doctor, the next question is also centered around closing the gap. So Dr. Abidemi Olaho says, how do we close the gap regarding the mindset that Islamic finance, as practiced today, still mimics conventional finance? How do we change that mentality?
Okay, do you have enough time today? Because this is a very important part.
Honestly, I think we can push it till zero, inshallah, with the permission of the organizers. I think we should push on.
Yeah, our own group here, it's in about 30 minutes, so we still have time.
Okay.
Yeah, what I'm asking is, this is a very important question, and I think I alluded to it during my presentation. When it comes to mimicking conventional finance, the first question I'm going to ask is, the ultimate result, is it based on Sharia principles or not? Now, if your answer is yes, there's no harm in mimicking conventional finance. Now, let me take you back to the time of the Prophet Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. I mentioned Mudaraba, I mentioned Musharaka. I mean, we've read some books, I can't remember some of them, some of the classical Arabic books where we have to trace the origin of some of these products like Mudaraba, Musharaka, and even Ijara. We trace them to the time even before the Prophet. But tracing them to that time doesn't mean they were being practiced as they are today, because the Quran was not revealed at that time yet. So what the Prophet ﷺ did was he had to actually reform them. He came as Rahmatan lil Alameen, as a blessing to the whole world, to the humanity. That's why when we discuss Islamic finance, I always emphasize Islamic finance is not only for Muslims. And that's why even when we do the structure, practical things, we have a deal, we are structuring. I always tell people, look, yes, we have to ensure it's Sharia compliant, but the next thing is we have to also ensure that it's conventionally viable, that even the conventional banks will rush to buy your product because of the yield, that is the profit they're going to make ultimately. So this is something we have to emphasize whenever we structure Islamic finance product. So when we talk about mimicking, I've seen there's a lot in articles written by scholars. Mimicking, there's no harm in mimicking. So far, you can actually make it Islamic. We talk about revats. You have a non-Muslim becoming a Muslim. Yeah, the person was a non-Muslim before he or she became a Muslim. So same thing, you can Islamize a product, a conventional program, and make it Islamic. And that is why you have the filter, additional filter at the end of the spectrum, where Sharia scholars will have to review the transaction and ultimately approve it. And I've seen situations where scholars have actually rejected some transactions. You just think they are there to approve all the transactions. No. I mean, I work with some of the global Sharia scholars like Sheikh Al-Gari, Nizam Yaqubi, and others. They actually reject some deals if they feel there are non-Sharia compliant elements. Even though I do agree with Bidemi that there are actually situations where, I shouldn't say this, in the global Islamic finance industry where they do what we call fatwa shopping. I have written a lot about this. I have 2 papers published on this in the UK. Unfortunately, but I have given the solution to fatwa shopping in those papers, where they try to mimic conventional products. At the end of the day, they shop for fatwa to get it approved. I have said this practice is very wrong, and we shouldn't be saying this in the industry. And I became the fatwa shopping scholar. I mean, some people call me fatwa shopper, you know, because I wrote against it. But I think it's something very important. I looked at the legal perspective, how you can use law to stop fatwa shopping. So these are things we have to watch. There's mimicking, but you have to ensure the end product itself is Sharia compliant. I wouldn't say the early Muslims actually were mimicking whatever. No, Islam is new, it's perfect. But what I'm trying to say is some of the products we know today, some of them were there before, but when the Prophet came, they were actually refined, reformed completely. Just as the Prophet reformed the whole society, reformed the whole world, the products were reformed. So if today, some of us are doing this role or playing this role of reforming those products and making them Islamic, there's no harm in it, and it's not mimicking. So far, the end product is Sharia compliant. Next question.
Okay. This person, I think the comment, we are International Halal Center from Musa Daoud. The advocacy for Islamic finance needs to be pushed, and I'm sure we all agree that. So it's all hands on deck. This question is from Mustafa Noibi. He says that you spoke about the need for prospective lawyers to also specialize in Sharia audit and advisory, that is a CSAA offered by AOFI. Does this include lawyers who are not necessarily experts in Sharia, but experts in Islamic finance?
Yeah, definitely. I think it includes lawyers. I mean, you see, it's always good to, you know, there's this saying, hasibu anfusakum qabla an tuhasabu. You should always take account of yourself before you present yourself, you know, to be evaluated. So always think of how to improve yourself. Don't rest on your hours anytime. So even lawyers who are actually not experts in Sharia, but they're experts in Islamic finance, they have a special program. The CSAA, I think, is for Sharia. There's another one on Islamic finance, which some of our brothers are also doing. There's no harm in doing this. Brothers should try to actually up their skills as much as possible. And this is what I always encourage. I mean, as I'm sitting here, despite what I do on a daily basis, my job, I'm still exploring so many things in terms of upskilling. You have to do it on a daily basis. You have to make sure your today is better than yesterday and your tomorrow is better than today. So this is something we should do. And I think I encourage you, even though you're not a Sharia expert, or you're an expert in Islamic finance, you do some of these programs. Some of them are offered in English, not necessarily Arabic, so you can do it.
Hello? Hello? I think we lost her. Okay.
Yeah, I'm done. I'm just
Okay.
Yeah.
Yes, so this person is more of recommendation to Sayyid Muhammad say Assalamu alaikum to the. So I wanted to use this medium to thank the organizers of this webinar. My little contribution is to encourage this forum to create several social media channels like WhatsApp, Twitter, LinkedIn, basically for the purpose of creating awareness of Islamic finance among the Nigerian elites. He also says for the stakeholders, he wants us to have a fashion in spreading the ideal of Islamic finance. So I guess again, this is all about spreading creating awareness, the campaign, all hands on deck. Mahmouda Yusuf says that there's a controversy about Islamic finance as practiced now, and that it's not different from conventional banking except for the names used. How do we identify finance institutions practicing Sharia compliant banking? So again, I think this is also around the mindset thing, but it's more deep now. It's deeper because this is where a lot of us, you mentioned it earlier, where we don't believe that there's actually Islamic finance. And so this is really this issue coming up again. So that's the question from Mahmouda Yusuf. How do we identify finance institutions that actually practice Sharia compliant banking?
Yep. Okay, thank you, Sister Mahmouda. Good to see you here. Good to hear from you. She's an old colleague. And it's actually, I think the practice of Islamic finance in Nigeria again, we've heard from some of the top Islamic banks, from Jais, Taj Bank, and we heard again also from Lotus, which has been doing a lot. I guess the practice of Islamic finance is different from conventional finance. Again, the mindset generally is that we are mimicking conventional finance. I don't think is the case. I mean, I've been studying Islamic finance for, I don't know, maybe over 15 years or more. I would say 20 years because we did fiqh muamalat even in Arabic school, in the local Arabic school in Ilorin back then. Yeah, so what I've seen even globally now, basically, there's a room for improvement, but they are different. Islamic finance is not the same as conventional finance, but there's room for improvement and we keep improving. And this is what we do. There are a lot of reforms going on a global level. And I think this will also happen in Nigeria and things will improve going forward. So I guess we may need to, I see another comment relating to this, relating to facilitating training sessions, capacity building for lawyers who are interested in Islamic finance and advisory. This is something very important. I will be happy to facilitate these training sessions on specific aspects like legal documentation, like how do you structure a sukuk from beginning to the end. These are some of the things I do on a daily basis, but subject to my own time, basically, because I'm always on the move. If not for COVID-19, I will not be here to speak to you. I'm always on the move globally. So, but I'll be happy, inshallah, to have kind of a hands-on sessions with you. I have done this before. I have the slides ready. I don't need to prepare. And we can share, some of the agreements we use for live transactions. But I'm gonna actually try to, blot the names off so that you don't see the names of, the parties.
Okay. Alhamdulillah, I'm sure Barrister Qasim has taken note of that, and I'm sure he'll be reaching out to you once we conclude this session to book a date for the next session, inshallah. All right, we have something from Engineer Musa Dawood. He says that the banks and the lawyers, they need more advocacy. Media visibility is important. Media and businesses are not mentioned in the partnership marriages as proposed by you, Dr. Umar. Just before you respond to this, I would want to say that actually I'm in the media space, and I know that we've been calling out to these banks. They are not coming to us, and we know how the conventional banks are, bombarding us with adverts and what have you, and we're not seeing the Islamic banks doing the same thing. So they're not even using the media space to reach out to their potential customers. So Dr. Hussein, what would you say to that?
Well, again, you've said it all. Regarding the media, you're a media personality, so they are not approaching you. Some of the reps are here today, so they'll take the message back and perhaps they'll sponsor specific events for you. And let's have more advocacy. I think that's key. Then one more thing, there's a question that is important from, or a comment from Nuruddin Abdul Salam. I think it's very important. He mentioned about the need for Sharia compliant treasury bills. He said today the Islamic banks are still forced to invest in interest-based treasury bills. Well, I have engaged with some of the MDs of the banks in Nigeria, the Islamic banks, regarding this. What we do in ILLM, the essence of treasury bills are just for short term, which is very important, short term, for them to manage their liquidity, for the banks to manage their liquidity. This is something we do at the global level. That's my job, to issue sukuk, so that short-term sukuk, so that banks can manage their liquidity. So it's an alternative to even the T-bills, the treasury bills of the US. In fact, at the moment, in terms of yield, the IILM Sukuk, which is my own organization, we are competing now with treasury bills in terms of the yield. We pay more to the investors than the US treasury. So we see more people coming to buy our Sukuk every month, and we issue every month. In fact, for the past few weeks, we've been issuing every 2 weeks. We issued 2 weeks ago. I'm issuing again next week because we're funding a new asset. So, and we'll be issuing again early next month, immediately after the Eid. So what I'm trying to say is we have been able to establish the ILLM Sukuk as an alternative to the treasury bill, the US T-bills. I'm not even talking about the Nigerian T-bills. Now, the CBN buys our Sukuk on a monthly basis because they are trying to establish a Sharia-compliant kind of liquidity framework. So they use our Sukuk to securitize our Sukuk for the fund so that banks will have a Sharia-compliant alternative to the interest-based treasury bills. So I can tell you the central bank is doing a lot to provide alternative kind of products to the banks for them to manage their liquidity. And they are using our Sukuk for that. So that's part of our role at the global level.
All right, then. Jazakumullah khairan. We have something from Olabin Radini. He says that he's a young professional that just got a job offer in one of the conventional banks, but he's still worried about Islamic position and he needs you to enlighten him.
Well, I'm not here to give fatwa on where to work and where not to work. And the organizers invited me strictly to speak to lawyers on legal issues, but I can just tell you what I feel about this. Again, as much as possible, I think you should try to explore halal alternative to whatever you're doing at the moment, as much as possible. But again, you have to balance so many things. Again, this is where the maqasid comes in, because somebody will say, should I go and steal? I have an alternative. I'm working in a conventional bank, and you're telling me to leave conventional bank and go out there. I have nothing to eat. Then I have no option than to steal. We're not going to tell the person to steal, but my advice is try to get a Sharia-compliant alternative. Again, you don't have to all work in banks. I can tell you. I have given lawyers so many ideas on what they can do, what they can do in terms of upskilling themselves in Sharia-compliant way. Now, even if you're not a lawyer, there are businesses you can do in a very halal way and make more money. You just need the capital from somewhere. And perhaps maybe when you open an account with some of the Islamic banks in Nigeria, after a few months, you'll be able to get personal finance to actually finance some of the things you want to do. I don't know, how they give their products there. So, but I think it's important to start thinking of alternatives as much as possible for you, inshallah.
All right. Yeah, so we have another question from Mustafa Noibi. He says that what are the efforts being made by IFSB perhaps to ensure a holistic standard of regulation for global Islamic finance?
Beautiful question. IFSB, for those who do not know what it means, is the Islamic Financial Services Board. And it's actually my sister body here. IILM, it's my own organization. IFSB is a sister body. There are these two international organizations in Islamic finance that are intergovernmental, and they are based here in Malaysia. The Nigerian government is a member of these two institutions, and the CBN sits on my board. And fortunately, a Nigerian is also the head of that organization, IFSB. Two Nigerians are heading these two international organizations at the same time. And one thing about it is they actually do standardization, and I can tell you they are doing a lot. You can even attend some of their online webinars as I speak. And they are actually making a lot of efforts in standardizing regulations. And what they do basically is they provide the standards on corporate governance for takaful, governance of takaful institutions. They do them at the macro level. They actually give them to the central bank members because their members are central banks and some others. So the central banks will actually review their regulations and implement them and enforce them in their respective jurisdictions. So this is the way it works. So the standardization is taking place at the international level, and a lot is going on as I speak. And they've introduced so many guidelines. If you go to the IFSB website, just Google it. They have numerous guidelines which are actually being adopted in different countries. In fact, in Bahrain and even in Nigeria and some other countries, it's compulsory. Their guidelines are enforceable. They're in those countries. Banks have to adopt them. In Malaysia, it's still optional because the central bank here has its own framework, but they adopt some of the principles. So a lot is going on at the international level. And a lot of efforts from the IFSB. I mean, I can discuss this if I have to go one by one in terms of their regulations. They have one on takaful, capital market. They did one on regulation of Islamic banks a few years ago. It's also available online. You can download it online. So these are some of the things they've been doing in terms of standardizing. So once they standardize, they cascade it down through the regulators. They call them RSA, regulators and supervisory authorities. So this includes, for the purpose of Nigeria, you have the CBN, you have the NDIC, you have, for insurance, is it NICOM? NICOM is a member, NICOM. So they all adopt some of these standards. So when you see NICOM or CBN coming to introduce new guidelines in Nigeria, the guideline may be based on the IFSB principles. So a lot is going on at the international level, and I think we appreciate what they're doing. So they draft all these standards. ILLM in my organization, we don't draft standards. We are into the capital market. We issue sukuk. So this is the difference between the two. We issue sukuk to provide short-term liquidity to Islamic banks across the world so that they can manage their liquidity. And I'm sure some of you are familiar with Basel III requirements in terms of the LCR ratio, where the banks have to maintain certain kind of ratio, liquid assets, within a 30-day period to be able to withstand any stress. So our sukuk actually stands as that HQLA, the high quality liquid assets banks can hold, a Sharia compliant one denominated in US dollars. Bank can hold it and they can sell it immediately. You can buy it now and sell it next minute in the open market. And what we do again, when we see banks that want to offload, they want to sell, we easily link them up with investors who want to buy. So this is some of the area. I mean, and we issue our sukuk from the, using the platform of the Bloomberg AUPD, every month, and it's quite efficient. We have a panel of primary dealers of about 10 of them, including Standard Chartered Bank and some of the banks in the GCC. And a lot of bidding is going on, almost every 2 weeks. People buy our sukuk. So this is, let me take more questions, if there are.
All right, Jazakumullah khairan. So does Bashir say, Malam Bashir says, Jazakumullah khairan, doctor, as an international Islamic economy expert with experience of global trend, I think you're most needed to assist in developing other components of our Islamic economy, not just Islamic finance. So you can help us liberate the Ummah from poverty. He needs you to comment, please.
Well, thank you, Bro Bashir. I'm not claiming to be an international expert or somebody who will liberate the Ummah. But again, to comment on this, I have been an advocate for poverty alleviation through Islamic finance. I say Islamic banks are not Father Christmas, but they should do more. I mean, this is what I keep saying. And I started advocating for this many years ago, over 10 years ago, even in my textbook on Islamic banking and finance, published by Pearson in the UK. I made it a point there. In my writings, I do advocacy a lot. I made it a point there that part of the role of Islamic banks should be Islamic microfinance. You shouldn't have separate Islamic microfinance institutions. Islamic banks should dedicate a unit that will contribute and focus on poverty alleviation, financing SMEs, basically, and entering into musharaka and mudaraba with them, but supervising them. So this is something we should encourage and encourage poverty alleviation. Yes, there's a need for to expand the scope beyond just Islamic finance, to focus on Islamic economy, the halal economy generally, to be able to reach out to. And as I said earlier on, if we follow strictly some of the rules Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has set in the Quran and Sunnah, there won't be any poor person out there. Again, if we all pay our zakat and take care of our kith and kin, all our relations, Allah tells you, as I said earlier on, you should give your kith and kin. You cannot eat and go to sleep, and your neighbor or your relation is hungry. You have to assist. Again, it's compulsory. I don't want to go into tafsir of this verse. You have to do it. Allah has put their right in your own wealth. We have to share. I mean, this is something, if we all do this, there won't be any beggar out there. And you have the zakat. this is full of, a lot. I mean, you can actually mobilize zakat funds. We are working even on a project, with a UN agency on zakat at the moment to work on how we can mobilize zakat funds to help migrants, who are stuck or refugees. I mean, these are things we have to do in terms of showing people the value proposition in Islamic finance, in Islamic law, in Islamic economy. And this shows the beauty of Islam, because the Prophet did not just come for Muslims. He's rahmatan lil alameen.
Alhamdulillah, Jazakumullah khairan. Brother Soliu is grateful for your presentation. He's making dua for you and the organizers. We have Brother Hassan Idris, and this is specifically for you, Dr. Hussein. He says it's an absolute pleasure listening to you. He will want you and him to discuss on providing, so you probably pick up on that. Something along insurance policy for Sukuk.
Okay, thank you, Brother Hassan Idris. I guess that's from IDB. That's from
ISDB. Yes.
ISDB, yeah. The brother, I think I can recognize some of the names.
He was actually my colleague once, so I'm going to get hold of him after this, inshallah.
Okay.
Brother Sadiq has been trying to ask a question. He requests that you experts, someone like you, Dr. Omar, to please help propagate spreadsheets and work frames for basic elements of bookkeeping, ledger entries, and accounting formats that are geared towards Islamic finance, Sharia compliance. He's saying this because small businesses are in need of this basic contribution. That's from Brother Sadiq.
Okay. I mean, that's good. I mean, it's something we have to. I've not done much about this. Basically, I'm not an accountant, but I do agree that it's an area we should focus on as well. And I think we do have some of these companies like Path Solution and others that are providing Sharia compliance softwares, even for Islamic banks. I'm sure they have simpler solutions for small businesses. And I think this is very important. We have to propagate this. Now, quickly going back to Bro Hassan Idris' question regarding credit enhancement on our Sukuk. I think this is even, a direct question to me. And this relates to some of our Sukuk structuring efforts. It relates to my current job. So I think it's very important. My team has been discussing with ISEC, and I think they had a call 3 days ago with ISEC. And I think one thing you have to do at ISEC, Bro Hassan, is to try to see whether you can also get S&P rating, Standard & Poor rating, because we are only rated by Standard & Poor. Once you have that, I think that will make it easy, and you're going to make a lot of money providing a third-party guarantee for our Sukuk structuring efforts. This is perfect, and I welcome the collaboration between the IILM and ISEC. Thank you.
Oh, very well then, alhamdulillah. So Brother Sadiq is saying something in about the market. So I think this is for the likes of the lawyers here and of course the banks, because he says they are available, but are these finance lawyers ready for the startups and MSMEs? So I think this is very clear. There's a want, there's a need, so the lawyers need to fulfill that and address this halal economy that you mentioned earlier in your presentation. I don't see any more questions. Okay, there's Mohammed Abolari. He says, zero interest products sold by conventional banks, are they Sharia compliant? Is a direct question about zero interest products that are being sold by conventional banks.
Okay, good question. Let me just again add a part to that question. You talk about zero interest. Now in Europe, we are seeing even negative interest rates now, where you have to pay to keep your money in the bank. Instead of putting your money in the bank and have your little interest coming in, now you have to pay to keep your money in the bank. That's what we are seeing in Europe, negative interest, not even zero. Now people are saying whether is this Sharia compliant or is, maybe Allah is punishing them, that's why they are forced to have negative rates, Now, zero interest products are not necessarily Sharia compliant. For a product to be Sharia compliant, it has to go through the Sharia product development process. And the process ends with an approval from a Sharia committee or a Sharia expert certifying that that product is Sharia compliant. Without that aspect, a zero interest product may not necessarily be Sharia compliant. You may still have elements of gharar there. You may still have elements of, what you call inequality, where that particular product will violate the verse of the Quran that says that you don't need to be property amongst yourself in falsehood. And I mean, you may not have that kind of meeting of mind, consensus ad idem, consents of the parties there. So I think we have to look at the details of the transaction. As people say, the devil is always in the details. One of my brothers say we shouldn't mention devil, we should say the angel is always in the details. So it's always good to look at the way it's structured itself rather than just saying zero interest product is Sharia compliant. No, it's not necessarily Sharia compliant. Thank you.
Fair enough. Jazakumullah khairan. Do you mind one more question? This is from Amolola Dara.
My group here is still about 10 more minutes. No problem.
Perfect. Alhamdulillah. All right. So Molala Dara says, Salam alaikum. There's usually a window for microcredit in banks or Islamic bank, but microfinancing is not as easy as that. There are structures. Otherwise, if it is not charity, there will be losses. And so she wants you to clarify why clients like to make so much profits and yet claim they want halal investment, but they don't want to make losses. She also says that what are the plans to share compliant instruments or regulations for trustees and wealth transfer? All this from Molala Dara.
Okay, thank you, Molala. I think this is quite important. I quite agree with your reasoning here. Nobody actually wants to make loss. No, I mean, nobody. Again, this is the mentality. We've been actually operating a conventional industry that has spanned over 200 years. And it's based on interest that you have to make profit. So now when you introduce the PLS, the profit and loss kind of models, when these were introduced in the early 80s, late 70s and early 1980s, people were like, oh, will this work? How will you make money? The question was, how will Islamic banks make money? Now Islamic banks are making so much money. It's a matter of structuring. So when it comes to losses, I think there are ways to do the structuring to mitigate the inherent risk. So even for Mudaraba, yes, there are risks where perhaps you're going to make losses, but how do you mitigate this risk? Now, we've had situations where people use profit equalization. Some banks have been using this. It was used in Malaysia before, now it's been phased out. So different models have been used across the world to avoid losses. But again, as much as possible, people should actually try to understand that when they invest, they can actually make losses. It's possible. So I do agree, it's possible, but there are ways we mitigate losses. And this is where structuring ideas will come in. And it's quite difficult to introduce some of these risk mitigants into structuring because sometimes you still have to get them approved by the Sharia scholars or the Sharia committee to ensure that they are purely Sharia compliant. Because again, how do you actually structure something and agree that, let's say Mudaraba, for example, you agree that you're not going to share the whole profit when you make profit. You have to put some in a reserve. So tomorrow, if you're making losses, you use some of those reserves to actually cover the losses. So some Sharia scholars have approved this. They said it's fine, while some others have some reservations. So these are what they call risk mitigants that can be built within the structuring process itself. Well, so that to avoid this, because it's difficult for you to convince anybody. Now you just introduced Islamic finance in Nigeria. You want to convince clients or customers that, hey, you're going to make losses. They will run away. They are going to run away. So we have to now be kind of, be innovative in introducing some of these risk mitigants. And I do agree with your reasoning. Thank you.
Okay, she's also asking about regulations for trustees and wealth transfer. I think these are areas that are not yet being explored in the Islamic finance world that we have now.
Okay, here are Sharia compliant instruments or regulations for trustees and wealth transfer. Actually, there are. Maybe in Nigeria there are none, but I think there are. I don't know. I don't have time to go through this. There are a lot of wealth management instruments that are Sharia compliant. But I was having a discussion with some wealth managers here, to see whether they can replicate some of this product in Nigeria. But again, people always want to ask questions about the market, security, and all this. If you want to bring some of these foreign investors to establish, their companies in Nigeria, but there are a lot of, what they call products that have been designed or structured elsewhere. Again, you don't need to actually do everything from the scratch. Just adopt and adapt them to the Nigerian kind of environment.
Jazakumullah khairan, Doctor. Thank you so much for your time, and we sincerely apologize for stretching you beyond the time we agreed with you.
Good.
Alhamdulillah, Jazakumullah khairan. So we'll just wrap it up now. We'll give room for the presenters from Jais Bank, Taj, and Lotus Capital to give 60 seconds final thoughts. Having listened to, you've heard your customers complaining bitterly, you've heard all the things that Doctor had to say. So you have just 60 seconds. I'm going to start with Brother Abdurrahman from Jais Bank. You have 60 seconds to give your closing thoughts, please. Brother Abdurrahman Muhammad, Jais Bank. If you're not ready, Brother Taslim, can you give your closing remarks? 60 seconds, Taj Bank. I don't want us to push our luck too much with Dr. Hussein. So please give your closing remarks, Brother Taslim.
Okay. First of all, I want to congratulate Amofin Solicitors for this outing. We pray to see more and more of this in the coming days as the industry grows. May Almighty Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala reward the my learned senior colleague, and then my sister and all participants, including the questioners like Dr. Sadiq and Co. I can see them coming on and throwing in their questions. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala reward all of you, and I reckon it as an act of ibadah for all of us. But before I go quickly, there's this misconception that goes on and on and on the similarity between the operations of Islamic financial institutions and conventional financial institutions. And I quickly want to clarify that they are separate, and even their core banking application do not operate the same way. So there is a need for people to seek more clarity or seek more enlightenment in this regard, so that we don't end up misdirecting ourselves. Thank you.
Jazakallah khairan, Brother Taslim. Perhaps you also need to do more work in reaching out to us, because we need to meet in the middle at the end of the day. Brother Muhammad Abdurrahman, are you ready for us now? Jais Bank. Brother Muhammad Abdurrahman, are you ready for us? If not, can we take Brother Abdulghani Adedbindi, Lotus Capital?
Let me just quickly speak for my brother Muhammad Abdurrahman by adding a second point that on the media outreach, you see most banks have their ways of reaching out. So part of that means is through the social media, we could follow the banks, we could follow Taj Bank so that we see what these banks are churning out. Because if we don't follow them, how do we know what they are doing?
You can come to us. You know, it's a middle point. The GTB doesn't wait for me to come to them. They come to me. Access Bank comes to me. They're chasing me. You need to chase us. Don't wait for us to come to you. I think that's where we've been missing it.
Well, you know the challenge. You know the challenge that can arise in that circumstance, or in that scenario, is that by the time we are bombarded with proposals and we are trying to see which is which, we might not have that opportunity to look through and look for Sister Adams and the rest of them.
I'm sure we'll have another forum for this, inshallah. We'll meet
Okay, wa
alaikum salam, Brother Abdurrahman.
I thank the organizer, thank the main speaker and all the participants, and I think Jazakumullah khairan. Also, on the issue of difference between Islamic finance and other, I think the way is clear. But one thing about perception is, if you don't get knowledge, definitely perception will be the same. Assalamu alaikum wa barakatuh.
Wa alaikum salam wa barakatuh. Straight to the point, Jazakumullah khairan. Brother Abdulghani Adedbindi, it's over to you now. In 60 seconds, your closing remarks.
Thank you very much, the moderator. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Again, a very big thank you, Jazakumullah khairan, to Amofin Solicitors, the organizers of this event, my brothers from Jais Bank and Taj Bank. I won't say my learned colleague because I'm not a lawyer, but I mean, fantastic presentations all around and great questions from the participants. I'm glad to have this opportunity to be a contributor. in conclusion, I would just like to say that Sister Amina Adams, talking about media, the only thing I'll say is that we need to meet at a middle point. You know, media, there are regulations. The banks, the investment firms, they have their regulators. Media also has its own exposures and regulators, but we need to meet at a middle point. And I'm sure that both of us can come together, have a discussion, and then forge a way ahead. For Lotus Capital, you can reach us on our social media pages, or log on to our website, www.lotuscapitallimited.com. The capital is written in full and the limited is written in full. So there's a double L, www.lotuscapitallimited.com. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Jazakumullah khairan to you all. It's been a pleasure. We will take final thoughts from Dr. Hussein to wrap it up, and then we'll let him off so he can meet up with Salah, inshallah. Dr. Hosseini, please, you need to mute your mics. Oh, Brother Qasim, can you mute everyone's mic at this point? We don't need any more contributions, inshallah, so we can wrap it up. Dr. Hosseini, over to you, sir. Your closing remarks.
Thank you very much, the moderator, Sister Amina Adams, and the organizers. It's been a pleasure. I'm always very, very happy to have this opportunity to discuss with experts from my own country. I'm a Nigerian and a proud one for that matter. So wherever I am in the world, I guess this kind of events are always very important for me. And that's why I always try to make myself available. And I hope to have more of this, inshallah. And I thank the organizers. And I think let's keep it up. Let's continue the awareness. Let the media personalities work with the bankers and banks. You should sponsor the media. Let them actually use them to speak to the people. I mean, go through them, basically. I think, and I saw a comment from Dr. Sadiq Omala regarding social media that we should use unconventional kind of methods in reaching out to customers. I think this is also very important. And I think the banks are doing a lot already, but again, they can improve on this by working with the media personalities as their brand makers, inshallah. Thank you very much, and may Allah bless you all. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Jazakumullah khair. We'll take vote of thanks now from Sister Amasa Firdaus. She's one of our shining lights in this ummah. She broke boundaries. I'm someone that is very proud of her personally. I'm a lawyer at heart. Inshallah, someday I may become a lawyer in real life. But yeah, so Sister Amasa Firdaus would like you to take the vote of thanks, inshallah. Sister Firdaus.
First of all, I would like to thank Allah and say Alhamdulillah for making it possible for us to organize this program. It's one thing to plan, it's another thing to be achievable. Really appreciate Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for this opportunity. Then I will go ahead and thank Dr. Umar Husseini. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala reward you abundantly. Jazakumullahu khairan. We are very, very grateful. We have learned a lot from your wealth of experience and your knowledge. We thank Allah for you, and we pray Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala continue to increase you in knowledge, understanding, and increase you in all the goodness, in all what you do. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala reward you. Amen. So let me thank my sister Amina Adams. May Allah reward you abundantly for piloting this event. You have tried a lot. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala increase you too in knowledge and understanding. Then I would like to thank Mr. Muhammad Murtala Abdurrahman from Jais Bank. Thank you very much for being present. We thank Mr. Teslim Olajumaisa Akoshide. Thank you from Taj Bank. Thank you very much for your presence and your sharings. Then Mr. Babatunde Abdugani Adegbindi. Sorry about that pronunciation. We thank you so much for your time and your sharings, and also introducing us to some of your products. We pray Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala make it beneficial. Then to all the questioners, we thank you so much. It shows that there is rapt attention, and everybody really were listening, not just present. we all listened. So we thank you so much. And generally to all participants, thank you very much for your presence. And I pray Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala make it beneficial to us in this world and in the hereafter. So before I draw the curtain, I must thank Amofin Solicitors for coming up with this wonderful idea. It is very, very laudable. I pray Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala continue to bless the firm, put a lot of barakah in the firm so that it can become bigger than it is, and may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala make it more beneficial to the community. So inshallah, thank you very much everyone. Jazakumullahu khairan. Thank you.
Well, Antum for Jazakumullah khairan. Thank you so much, Sister Firdaus. We will now leave the floor to Barrister Qasim. He's the one that brought us all together, so he will give us the closing remarks before I pull the curtain on today's event, inshallah. Barrister Qasim, we want to hear from you.
Yeah, Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Alhamdulillah.
Okay, we thank Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, we glorify him, we adore him. I bear witness that Prophet Muhammad is his slave and his messenger. I thank Dr. Humor. First of all, I've been on his neck for over 1 month now, and alhamdulillah, I sincerely appreciate him. I sincerely thank him. Despite his busy schedule, he still make out time to be part of this today's event, even though the vote of thanks has been taken. But again, just like this popular writer said, William Shakespeare in his book, he said, how sharper than a serpent's tooth it is to have a thankless child. So you still need to appreciate Dr. Humor when you know his busy schedule and where he's coming from. I also appreciate all the participants from the banks and all the participants generally who took part in this event. We've learned a lot of lessons from this presentation so far, and I can assure you that the take home from this event will be appropriately integrated. Those ones that concern lawyers, inshallah, we're going to give feedback to Mulan for this, and those that concerns the firm generally, we're also going to step up our game and reposition ourselves for the market. While my brother from Jais Bank was making his presentation and my other brothers from Lotus Capital and Taj Bank, they continuously mention lawyers, law firm, and all that. And I can assure you that when you try Amofin Solicitor, next time you have issues like this, you're not going to have any regret. I can assure you of that, because apart from having lawyers who are really poised and who are up to the task in the firm, we also have external consultants. We consult in some other areas like Islamic finance of this nature. So let me not start another lecture. So rather, let me just make it a conclusive, concluding part by saying Jazakumullahu khaira to everyone. And inshallah, this is going to be an annual event as we start this year. It's going to be an annual event. By next year, we're going to have another one. And this is our contribution to the growth of Islamic finance from the firm. So I pray Allah make it easy for us to achieve. And to Dr. Humor, inshallah, we're going to reach out for more of this assistance in the future, inshallah. And to the participating banks, we're also going to reach out for more of this event in the coming days and years, inshallah. So may Allah make it easy for every one of us. And Jazakumullahu khaira for attending this event. And thank you all. We are very, very appreciative. Thank you.
Alhamdulillah, Jazakumullah khairan, Barrister Qasim. For me, what I would like to end with is something Dr. Umar said. I'm not a lawyer, but like, one of the things we need to do is to move away from prohibition-driven to social objectives. And when he said that, what struck me is what I want to share with us. You know how we raise our children, and we are always saying, don't pray. If you don't pray, you go to fire. If you don't respect your parents, you go to hellfire. If you this, what about we start to say Allah loves you? If you love Allah, you would want to obey Him willfully. So we need to start to change in that, and that's what I really connected with the most. The entire lecture I connected with it, but this really struck home with me. May Allah make it easy for all of us to improve in our ways, and of course, take Islamic finance or Islamic economy as a whole to greater heights, inshallah. It has been a pleasure and an honor being your chaperone on this journey. This is where we draw the curtain on today's event. Until we meet again, bismillah, I leave you all in the protection of Allah. Subhanaka Allahumma bihamdik, shada la ilaha illa anta, astaghfiruka wa atubu ilayk. Subhana rabbika rabbil izzati amma yasifun. Wa salamun ala al-mursalin walhamdulillahi rabbil alamin. Jazakumullah khair for your time. Ma'asalam.